friends at home, apologies. All right, so now we're also streaming live, and we'll jump right back in. All right, so apologies for those joining us at home. That was not intentional, and you should be now with us. I was just running through the agenda. Awesome. Mark Devin Weibel joins us fresh from travel at 7:33 p.m. Thank you, Devin. So I noticed we have a lot of members of the public present tonight, and we applaud the participation and your attendance here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I do want to note that I suspect there's a fair amount of participation here regarding some of the emails and that topic. Please know that we are in the middle of an investigation. We have attorneys looking through our emails for the board from the last year. That is not yet complete. We're hoping to have that review complete by tonight. It's not yet complete. Our intent is that we will hold a special meeting within the next 2 weeks where we will review the results of that look that the attorneys are doing of the emails to determine whether or not there are any FERPA violations where we have where there's been any disclosure of student data, which I don't suspect that will be the case, but we want to make sure that a third party is doing the evaluation and telling us whether or not that's true. We're gonna they'll also look for FOIA violations. They'll also look to make sure that we're adhering to our bylaws. As a part of that meeting, we will also be starting the process of getting specific training for all board members to make sure that we're all perfectly aware and adhering to our bylaws, FERPA, and FOIA. So while I appreciate people are here, we do have and may want to talk about that. I hope that we can keep to a civil discourse and try to allow us to do the work that we need to do tonight in the benefit of our schools. With that, we'll move on to our first item on the agenda, which is our consent agenda. What we'll look for is reviewing the minutes of the September 14th, 2021 Easton Board of Education regular meeting, as well as the bullying policy. The notes were distributed last Friday, which was the 8th. And so at this time, I will be looking for any corrections or changes that we need to make now. Please keep in mind that the policy portion, there is a second reading always, and we'll dive into a more detailed conversation at that point. Are there any corrections or additions that we need to make at this point? No, no, Devin, good, Jim? Okay, very good. If there are no corrections to be offered, absent objection, the consent agenda is considered approved as presented. That moves us to public comment. If you can please make sure to state your full name, street, and town. Please make sure that you're limiting comments to 3 minutes. Please focus on Easton's educational interests. Please do not target individual district personnel, and please express your comments in a civil manner. Do I have public comment? Yes.
Good evening. Excuse me. Dr. McKinnon is on here. Dr. McKinnon.
Hello.
Good 21 Glory Easton. Thank you so much for the FOIA information that you sent to me on the 3 boards policy committee. I requested that in May, and I appreciate you coming through on that. I'm hoping that these in the future will be more timely. This one is still suspicious because of the fact that there's 3 boards of education that have 1 policy committee put together in that manner, but I'm having people look at that. Request for correction to my September public comment. Sorry, just for the Boston. Former interim superintendent Thomas Warren sent letter to parents on the EUA jab clinic, the vaccine clinic that they had at the Easton Community Center. I don't understand how he sent a letter about that on public health. Again, I speak for Unmask Our Children, Reading, Easton, Wilton, Westport, Ridgefield. There's nothing on the agenda in regard to masking the children. I can provide my press, I forgot my press release, sorry. But I spoke at one mental health presentation on the psychological effects of masking children. It's horrendous. We are aware the district the previous superintendent Harrison signed for ESSER grants and the board. And all that is tied to asking our kids for best use. And again, I am also the advocate coordinator for child abuse in the classroom, the program, the group that was against for violations, and I'm sure I'll go into that another meeting. Point of Attorney General Garland and his comments on declaring parents terrorists. We are the electorate. We pay the taxes to put teachers and schools together. The truth is that his son-in-law is involved with Panorama Education, sells SEL. We have our own problem here in Easton. Devin Whipple also sells SEL for Catapult Learning and is part of In Bloom, which is the Arnie Duncan is the former United States Department of Education Secretary, and he's in charge. So I respectfully request that Devin Whipple steps down from the Easton Board of Ed due to this conflict of interest, post-haste. Lastly, safe school climate. Please read up on Loudoun County's Education Board of Ed. Their safe school climate has lawsuits based upon, let's say, their bathroom policies. It's despicable. It's all ruse. It's not education. It's indoctrination. We must return to education. We see the devolution of our schools and state. Please vote Republican to regain our schools. 30 years of one party is how it's damaged. Thank you.
Any additional public comment? Yes.
Carolyn Oppenheim, Huckingers Road. It's a very, I'm not one for writing things down, and it's with a very heavy heart that I bring forth concerning moments that have happened on this board in the last few months with one of the members sending emails to a member in town that has violated the school, violated laws in the town, and it's difficult for me because it's somebody that I have always felt was very much a part of the school and the school's the education, and have a lot of respect for. So it was very difficult to hear about a huge violation of trust that I felt occurred. I'd like to hear if the board is going to be responding to it, because I now feel like I cannot write to this board for any reasons, because I don't know if somebody on this board would forward my email to somebody outside of the Board of Education. It was really disappointing. It happened after we knew, or I should say you knew that he had trespassed on school property. It's disconcerting, it's scary, and there is absolutely no reason or excuse. I'm tired of hearing people make excuses for this behavior because it was a tremendous violation of trust. My cousin actually posted something today, and it made sense to me. It was very timely. It said, I think it's one of the most humbling lines to live by, that is, if someone tells you you hurt them, you don't get to decide that you did it. It is not a difficult thing to take a few steps back and admit that your actions have caused harm to someone you care about. I believe this person has cared about the schools very much. And I feel very hurt because it was a political move on something that shouldn't be political. We are currently the schools have become way too political. I'm really sad about it, but this was somebody among you who decided that would be okay and to break trust with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? Yes.
Claire Wilkes, 66 Depot Road. Your reading statements. Over the years, I've attended many Board of Education meetings, especially when my kids were in lower schools. I developed respect for Mr. Parker as an intelligent, fair-minded, and reasonable person who appeared to have the best interests of Easton students at heart. I regret that his former actions call my former regard into question. I was deeply disappointed to learn that Mr. Parker, in his capacity as a Board of Education member, shared confidential parent emails and Board of Education documents with a third party. That action alone is unacceptable, full stop. But to compound this improper behavior, he shared these emails with an individual with, shall I say, unconstructive means and motives. In doing so, Mr. Parker has undermined the very board he represents. It breaks my heart because of how this negatively impacts this conscientious and hardworking group of people. You know, in terms of the damaged trust amongst themselves and with the community at large. So a law firm is now investigating if any federal laws or board policies were violated by the actions taken. Where's the money coming from to pay the legal expenses? And has it made the Board of Education vulnerable to lawsuits? More money potentially there. As a taxpayer, it really bothers me that someone entrusted with stewardship of town resources has recklessly behaved in a manner that is costing the Board of Education to sort it out. And as a parent, I worry for Easton's kids. Are they going to have their already lean budget further cut to pay for this? This too remains to be seen. Easton's education budget should be for supporting our wonderful schools, not legal expenses incurred as a result of actions by someone who frankly should have known better. Mr. Parker acknowledged what he did was wrong, but the damage has been done. He's demonstrated profound poor judgment and shown himself unsuited for a position of trust in this town. I don't know what his motivations were, but it's not a stretch to guess. And it's not a good look. Time will tell if he feels it was worth it to trash his reputation for political gain.
Yes. Yeah, I think.
I'm Amy Chinese, 14 Westwood Drive. I am a former educator at SSCS. And I've been to many board meetings when my children were here in the 90s and early 2000s. I came as an educator so that I could learn how everything works behind the scenes with only hardworking people. I do have a few questions. The first two are about recent events that bother me and my family. Why did Mr. Parker forward emails from concerned parents to the person who recently trespassed in SSCS? As a parent myself, I would expect that my correspondence to the Board of Ed would stay within the Board of Ed. And thank you for investigating this matter. My other comment is about teacher support. I hope that our teachers and administrators and staff are being supported during these difficult times. There are so many extra stressors placed upon staff this year, and I hope that Easton can retain these talented administrators, teachers, and staff that we have had for many years. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? Yes.
Debbie Bearer, 18th Street in Easton. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I appreciate that the board has engaged an outside law firm to conduct an independent investigation into the Jeff Parker email incident. The Board of Ed member entrusted with the safety and education of Easton's children shared private information with a person who trespassed in the elementary school and then lied about it. Jeff shared emails with that person, including names and email addresses of parents who wrote to the board with an expectation of privacy. As Mr. Stinson said, the investigation is ongoing. Here are a few questions I hope to have answered. Why did Jeff do it? Why is he aligned with this person? What is this person's role, involvement, or position with the Board of Ed or town government for that matter. This person is active in the Republican Town Committee. Jeff is running for first select. Is that why he did it? For the Republicans to somehow use in the election? How else has he used his school board position for political business? His actions violate more than one item in the Easton Board of Ed bylaws. As a former board president and current secretary, he should be familiar with the bylaws, which are available on the ER9.org website. And Jeff still has access to parent communications. Maybe he should be removed from the board, his official ER9.org email address deactivated while the investigation is ongoing. How else is the public supposed to trust the Board of Ed? Easton parents of school-aged children, indeed any resident who believes in honesty, integrity, and transparency, deserve to hear the answers to these and more questions. We deserve to hear the truth.
Yes.
That's Nat Rose. I'm off the cuff also like Carol, so I'm not really so. But I did want to just say that I had the pleasure, I think I must say pleasure, of this summer reaching out to Jeff. Because I was worried about our schools. We got lost in the ER9 district. Our superintendent, Dr. McKinnon, I've already met with you and talked with you. You're wonderful, I'm happy you're here, but we had a really hard time losing superintendents at slim notice, and then also having 4 of the principals, 4 or 5. Kim Foster had left me, by the way. How paper is. But we lost a lot of our administration in our town in a very short period of time. And I reached out to Jeff Parker specifically around this because I was specifically worried about the impact of the Sprint group Save Our Schools on this town and on our ability to recruit. Our town and our schools do not need saved. We just had the numbers just came out as in the patch saying that HPMS, we're standing right now, is number 13 in our state. This is a good school district. But what worries me, Jeff, is that you told me specifically that you thought that was gonna all die down. And to hear that you said that you didn't really think that was really big deal stuff, we were aligning with them is a big thing. I know we went to the 4 houses and apologized. There are 2,700 households in this town that deserve an apology. You need to say more, you need to explain why.
Jacob, with on the north side. I did write something down, but I do want to say, when I first moved to town and I started coming to meetings, Jeff, you were the leader of the group. And that was back when I didn't even realize that the Board of Ed was made up of Republicans, Democrats. I thought it was just made up of people who wanted to do the right thing for our kids. You would even talk about meeting with parents about questions. I voted for you. Many people will call me a bleeding heart liberal. I am in a lot of things, but I voted for you, not knowing anything about anything other than you appear to be a great leader. My son and my husband came tonight because this is such a big deal. So I wrote a few things down, and I'm an unaffiliated voter. I vote on both sides based on my perceived character of a person and how they represent issues in the town. I voted for Mr. Parker and I get hurt. As an Eastern resident who voted for him in 2017, I have yet to receive an apology for the covert way he aligns and supports the group. In my opinion, represents a segment of our town and our kids. He did this not only behind my back, but also the backs of the people you're sitting next to right now, but more importantly, the kids. All the kids you profess to represent. But this group you're aligning with, and my gut says perhaps is even a member of, most kids don't see their reflection in that group. You apologize to the parents of the emails that were forwarded, but where's the apology to people who elected you to this cherished position? It's not the Board of Finance, it's not the Board of Selectmen, it's the Board of Education. I cannot control what people think or what their beliefs are, nor do I want to. However, when someone claims to be transparent and claims to represent all kids, he aligns himself with a group that publicly states during this past summer's superintendent search that all candidates should emphasize traditional academic excellence over student comfort and should have a positive view of American history and the Western tradition. You don't get to decide the direction of the board the Board of Ed does. You have broken the sacred trust we parents put in our elected officials. You chose a path that was deceitful, cowardly by not coming out forward and saying, I support this. And in the end, I feel like this is a disgrace to the history and the work you've done in Easton, because you've done a lot of great work. I'm telling you, you blew me away the way you let me do. I'm not gonna read any more, I think I've said enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I share the outrage that I've heard around the room, so I don't want to take up too much time.
Can you just give us your name and address?
Oh, sorry, Amy Wolfdale, 575 Sport Hill Road.
Thank you.
First I want to say, this is a great school board, and I love this school. My daughter had a really wonderful experience here, and she's still in the school system, and we love these schools. The work that you did through COVID to get all of us, you and the teachers, to get the families and the kids through, I'll never forget it. It was absolutely extraordinary, and it needs to be said first, because that's what makes this situation, with all its sneakiness and its duplicity, all the worse. I don't want to indict the school board or the schools or anybody else for the actions of Jeff Parker. But let's oppose the duplicity of Jeff Parker with every fiber of our being. For one thing, he violated the trust of the entire community. I have no long history here, and I have no sentimental history at all. I see only the violation of trust. What we know is that what he did, and he's still doing, was collaborating in secret with someone who does the following. He has no kids in the school system. He's attacked this very school board. He runs a PAC funded by dark money. We have no idea where any of that money comes from. He uses the PAC to spread lies and misinformation and divide the community profoundly. He's been caught doing everything from sneaking into the elementary school and then lying about it to what he was doing in dark clothes. Any parent's email would be an outrage. I almost want to put this in a special category. And I'll tell you why. Because what if this was only the tip of the iceberg? What if the emails of other parents were forwarded? What if those were the emails of parents who were already diametrically opposed to this guy who was collaborating with? Are we on an enemies list now? Do we have to worry about our safety or that of our kids? It's a valid question, given what we've read in the paper about this guy in recent weeks. Beyond the personal outrage, I think what Jeff Parker did was damage to the town that I chose to make my home, okay? He worked with the architect of our worst divisions. He breached and damaged the trust we ought to be able to have in public institutions. And the impact can be profound. It can be profound damage to our schools and the experience our kids have in schools and the interactions we have with our neighbors. And make no mistake about it, it could have a bad impact on our property values. I call upon Jeff Parker to step away from the board. His behavior shows he does not have the integrity or the judgment to serve in a public role. And part of the real tragedy here is that this awful scenario is playing out in little towns, nice little towns all across America. It's dividing communities that have gotten along for decades, if not centuries. We need transparency and trust if we're gonna ever restore unity. Jeff Parker is an obstacle to that. I'm very sorry, but I think he has to go. Thank you.
Any additional public comment?
David Russell, 39 Sunset Road. I couldn't disagree more with some of the comments here, specifically the latest. I just have to support Mr. Parker. I've worked with him over time as a parent. He was instrumental in getting a school security presence in our school system and has worked tirelessly on his board, I'm sure as the board members know. Volunteers his time, has been an exemplary public servant in this town. And I know there's snickering in the background about that, but this is not a joking matter. And I just have to say that he has my full support and many people in town. And if a mistake was made with emails, you can be viewed that way, but it's really no different than introducing people to each other at a party or some sort of social gathering.
Please, well, please.
If I could just clarify what I'm telling you, unless there was some personal information about a student included in those emails, I guess the attorneys will determine that. We should let them do the job before we throw Mr. Parker under the bus here. He's worked hard for many, many years, and we should support him. And if a mistake has been made, he has apologized already, has reached out to the people that have been affected by these emails. And I don't believe anybody here has been affected by those emails.
Sir, if you can please address your comments to the board. Thank you.
I'm done. I just wanted to make sure that someone voiced support for Jack here. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
We'll have to go around a couple of times. Yeah, yes.
Please, if we can please,
Okay, Bob Knapp,
thank you.
51 Tuckahoe Road. I've never been to a school board meeting. First time, been here 35 years I've lived here. I have two generations, my daughter, many of you know, and my son who went to all three schools within the district. And now I have my grandchildren going through schools. One's in Staples and two are in Joe Barlow. When I moved here 35 years ago, the question, I was accepting a position in Trumbull. And so we sat with the realtor, and the question I had, which was the best school system in the area? I had come from Philadelphia, which had lots of problems. I didn't want to send my kids to private school here. She said, you gotta go to Easton. We could barely afford it then. We're a little awful past that. And we've been, that was probably the best decision I made for the family, my wife and I made for our family through our entire lifetime. Both of my children have done very well. Beth is now a doctor. My son lives in Boston, is a very successful business person. And I've gone now as a grandfather just to the schools to watch my grandchildren and taking in everything the school system has to offer. It's great. I want to congratulate the board for giving us this type of school system. I want to congratulate the administrators and the teachers for providing this type of education. It is great. Now regarding the other subject, I had a long speech I was going to give, but then, as many of you know, this is out there. It probably says everything I would have said in this speech. But I wish I want to add one thing. This is to Jeff. Will Rogers once said, it takes a lifetime to build a good reputation, but you can lose it in a minute. This minute has now come. I don't know you, I've never met you, okay? But based on everything that's happened, as far as I'm concerned, your reputation is gone.
Yes.
And that's the 20 Morning Glory. I'm sorry, I returned my son to college today. I didn't realize it was a character assassination. I didn't know that Bob Nat sent out a glossy mailer. I gobbled down my dinner and came here. So I have been coming to Easton Board of Education and board meetings for over 10 years. I have constantly been coming to say that we need improvement. Common Core and everything else that's devolved to public education, and we need growth. We need to fix our schools. Jeff has done a lot. He's only one person on this board. Did he make a mistake? Yes. Did he apologize for it? Yes. I just cannot believe the character assassination. But then again, we're under 30, one party rule in Connecticut, so I hope that changes. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Kathleen, on Anniversary, Easton. I apologize.
I'm sorry, can you say your name and street again?
Kathleen, 101 First Street.
Thank you.
And I'm just apologizing to people because they articulated things much better than I ever could. And I might repeat a couple of things, I apologize for that as well. But I think it's really important to emphasize what's going on here. Not just about Jeff, but about you guys. You guys have done a great job over the last 6 months. You have met incredible challenges with the pandemic. You have our kids learning and growing, and thank you so much for doing that. US News, as Beth just mentioned, came out with a report about school rankings. Wow, impressive. HKMS, number 13 out of 288 schools in Connecticut. Wow. SSES, number 144 out of 560 schools. That's the top 26%. Wow. And yet there are people in this town saying we need to save our schools. What? We need to save ourselves from this group called SOS-SOT. They are a scary group of people. And I'd just like to say that they're not this grassroots initiative that they pretend to be.
Oh, it is.
There's a national initiative that is giving them templates and tools and messaging that are being used all across this country to divide small towns like ours. We have to stand up against them. And we have to save ourselves from SOS and SOT. I sent you emails with private information, Jeff, outside of the BOE. You showed an incredible lack of integrity. I don't think anything that has been said here tonight is a character assassination. I think it's truth. And I think you owe an apology to everyone in this town. And even that will not bring back your integrity. I don't think you belong on the Board of Ed. Do we want someone like Jeff Parker in a position of power in this town? That's my question for everybody here. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Commissioner Gavani, 30 Stones Road.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yes, Commissioner Gavani, Stones Road. First, I would like to thank you, all the board members, for your tireless efforts on behalf of our children in the face of all that has been going on in this town in the last 1.5 years. I'm going to say what a lot of people have said before me, much better than me, but I still want to say. My comment is about Mr. Parker, sharing parent emails by his PR9 email account with an individual who is not elected to any position having to do with our schools. I would like to know why he has aligned himself with a person affiliated with a group that has undermined our schools at every turn. While he has issued a watered-down non-apology claiming, and I quote, diverse voices should be heard, even though he chose to only share some of those opinions to advance his political agenda, he has not addressed why he did that. How can we trust his ability to advocate on behalf of our children's safety as an elected member of this board? How can we trust the BOE going forward if he's still part of it? How does the board plan to address this breach of trust and partisan activity? Mr. Parker, in the past, I have witnessed your work on the BOE, and I have always respected you for it. But now you have violated the trust of many parents and made a mockery of the honest work of your fellow board members. You put political interest above our kids. Was it worth your hard-earned reputation? Thank you.
Yes.
Just a quick comment to my neighbor about forwarding emails. It's like introducing someone to someone at a party. And
I'm sorry, if you can please address your comments to the board.
Okay.
yes, and just as a person in advertising, I know that it's not the same thing. Because when someone gets a hold of your email address, you are now open to the world. Everyone can find you. Everyone can send stuff to you. Everyone can even delve into more information via your email address. And that's not a small thing, and especially with this group, Save Our Schools or Towns or whatever, who knows what they are going to use those email addresses for. So even though it's, these days everyone is sharing emails. It's not a small thing. And that's all.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Alicia Young, Silver Hill Road. It's been about 35 years since I've been in this room. I was a graduate teller. This is more, my daughter will be tomorrow. I also have a daughter in Staples. I want to address some of my neighbors. Most of you I don't know. I think some of the prejudging on what we've heard on an audit that's ongoing is unfair. I do. I think there's a lot of declarative statements that have been made tonight on an audit that's not been finished. And if we're truly worried about cost in the education system, cancel the audit, save the money, because obviously Mr. Parker, according to most of you, is no longer fit to serve on this board. I could not disagree more. I am here because this Board of Education in the town of Easton has always been a phenomenal group of people. I moved back to this town to raise my family in this town because of our schools. I am proud of our schools. I applaud the work you all do. But let me also make one thing perfectly clear. This is going to distract us. And I think you have done a great job through COVID. But my daughter will complete her education at HKMS without one normal year. She will not move through this school with what I had to benefit from. She will never see her friends in this school without a mask. She doesn't have a locker. She doesn't have a normal lunch hour. She does not have normal activities. I want all those things back. I also want that for my daughter, who's currently in the 4th grade at Staples. Mrs. Fox Santora, I think you're going to want to school. But this is her 4th grade homework tonight. 0 times 3. And my daughter is not stupid. Both of my kids are gifted. I would like this board to put as much focus into the learning loss that has happened in the last 3 years in this school district as they have into any investigation of someone who's admitted he's made a mistake. You owe it to our kids. Remember your title, Board of Education, not investigation. Thank you.
Any additional comments? Yes.
Rocky Silver from Disney Drive. I wasn't going to speak until everything. I was trying to think of why and how Mr. Parker would have reasoned for doing the actions he did. And it wasn't at one time, it was several different instances of him doing it. The first case is he's not aware of what the rules and regulations of the Board of Ed are about privacy of the students and parents. And that is the case after being married to a principal for her entire life and then being on the Board of Education. You don't have the intellectual capacity to do it. The second thing is you knew it was wrong and you still did it. You also, in the email that part that I read was, I gotta stay out of the fray. You're using a proxy person to do your dirty work in a political thing. You didn't have the courage to stand up and say what you thought. It was kind of like how you proposed or your comments about the walkway. You were for it or against it. But you weren't using other people to push your agendas for you. It's just wrong.
Yes.
Alice Obama, 43 Corner.
I came here for the agenda tonight for my daughter's education. And I'd like to say a few things. First of all, I'll give my usual public announcement because I am here. I like to be almost every time. And I would like to ask the chair to reinstate these meetings on Zoom so that for parents and all these other people that aren't here all the time to join us. So that's my request. That's my usual public announcement there. The other thing I would like to talk about is the public comments. That's only one time now on the new agenda format. So I think that it is important for the public to have more than one time to comment for several reasons.
One is that we do not get all of the information that's presented before. And I understand that the meetings run long, and that's maybe why we're doing this, et cetera. But there are other things we can do with the format of the meeting so that they understand. One is providing all the materials up front, so maybe we don't ask the silly questions, they can go over 20 minutes from now. And the other item is to maybe help those that are presenting to multiple boards is record your presentation so that we can view it and everybody else, the board can view it beforehand. I view the Reading Board of Ed presentation that Dr. McKinney and Dr. McKinney gave on the SBA results, which I would like to talk about. They've gone down. I'm thinking that I know about 90% of exactly what you're going to say because it's a rewind the way it's already. One of the reasons, and it's no mystery, why the results went down is because last year the kids in Keller had a crazy, I would call it crazy, schedule. As of November of last year, so that would have been, we started later, it would have been September and October, maybe 2 weeks into November, compared to 1 year prior, the kids had 8 hours less of instruction time per subject. That was only 2 months into the school year. Multiply that out to the end of the year. We had Wednesdays, half days, and they were full. We did have some adjustments. We did have 6 minutes per subject, but the bulk of it, we barely made the state minimum for instruction time to count it as 1 full day of school. That's a big part of why we're behind. I don't know how you make up 8 hours times whatever, but we need to figure this out. And I hope that this is what we're going to be talking about tonight. The education of our kids, getting them back into the swing of things, getting them caught up. Our daughters are going to high school. There is no homework, absolutely no homework given. We need to rev up the education. It's 13, that's wonderful. A lucky number, I love it. But we should want more. We should always want more. We should always do better for them. The other things that we talk about, NWTA scores, DEI survey, school climate survey. We get a brief update and then it drops off. So I hope with these SBA scores, we see it through. We see individual attention to each of the students, whether they are up here or down here. We can't leave the ones up here alone. So that's all I wanted to say. I will say something about Mr. Parker. We will make mistakes. I think we tell our children this, we tell each other this, and we tell whoever else we believe in this. He has been a pillar of this community. He has supported me. He answers my emails, came to my house for the bus stop. We don't always see eye to eye. But I hope that everybody's can have their own opinion. But I hope that we can forgive and move on and talk about the kids here. Take your whatever you want at the polls. But in here, it's about our kids. So please, let's try to move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. All right. Moving on to board member comment.
Sure.
Yeah.
I've got a comment and then I've got an addition to the agenda.
Okay.
So do you want to do that during board member or after board member?
Let's go after board member comment, because we have another one we need to do as well.
Okay. I think it's great that we have a lot of participation tonight, and I think the debate, the discussion is encouraged. It's always encouraged. It's unfortunate that we lose folks when we don't do online. But I think in person is helpful. And I hope all of you that are here for the first time in 35 years or here for this 6th time or 10th time this year, continue to show up because it means a lot to the board to hear from you while we're here. We only get together once a month. Some of us are thankful for that. Others are not so much. The last year and a half has been absolutely nuts. And if you weren't, I don't want to say paying attention, but because you couldn't be involved in the level of discussions that the board members were. So I'm going to say, and it's my opinion, you don't have an appreciation for what we went through. Not everybody sitting here was involved in that because they weren't all on the board at the time. I have been for 8 years plus. I don't want to ever go through that again. And I'm this close to saying sayonara because it's not worth it. The amount of time that we spend going through things that frankly have nothing to do with the education of our children. There's a ton of social and emotional stuff that frankly I wasn't aware of or as much as I could have been, even though I sat in your chair for several years before I joined the board. A lot of people ask me, what did you do that for? After you sat in the audience for 3 or 4 years. But the social emotional aspect of it is huge. But we have to push forward and do what we need to do for the kids, for the betterment of the administrators, the teachers, and ultimately the students. We did not do the best job of that the last 18 months. We were distracted. We were torn in 6 different directions, or at least 2, that divided this board pretty much right down the middle. It's never been political. We had too many votes that were divided right down political lines. I never want to see that again. It's great to disagree. It's fine to disagree. I'm all for that. And you ask anybody that half knows me, I love to have a good debate and a good discussion. I usually win, but that's just, but seriously, don't make it 35 years before you come back here. Okay? Stay involved in this if it's important to you. And I assume it is because you're here tonight. And there's plenty of other things you could do on a Tuesday night.
Thank you, Randy. Jim? Okay. Jenny? Devin?
First, I want to say it is nice to see the chairs filled. We don't normally get that, so thank you. I did want to just make sure that we acknowledge the really hard work of our educators, that the stresses that we feel our educators are feeling, and they're compounded by some of the strife that's happening in the community. They experience that as well, and they manage every single day to show up for our kids. And that's not just our teachers, that's our cafeteria workers, our janitors, our bus drivers, every staff member, paraprofessional, librarian, every single human. And, you know, I read the US News and World Report today as well and saw the numbers. And while I'm sure our test scores have dropped a little bit, and that's not ideal, what I see is kids going to school in person, which is not happening everywhere in the country. They are staying in school. You guys have done an amazing job of keeping kids COVID-free, not having to quarantine kids like every other week, and making sure that they're engaged, they're having fun. I mean, I have a focus group of 2, so in fairness, it's not the whole group, but my kids come home from school every day asking to go back to school. The next day, they oddly love the bus. But it is really appreciated, and so I just want to say thank you to you, but really thank you to every single person who has contact with our kids. It matters, and it's really greatly appreciated. Second, I just want to say to this board, to John, that I do appreciate the independent investigation. I think it's important that things be investigated, that there's an opportunity for a report, so that there's been a lot of, you know, frustration or concern about politicization. I think by having an independent report, it takes away the fear of politicization, which I think is important. And then thirdly, you know, I do think this board has a lot of work to do, unfortunately, to repair trust in our community. A lot of people are here tonight, and you know, they're frustrated. I think, as someone who's known in Jeff, I'm sorry to single you out, for, you know, the years that I've been here. I've only been here, what, 5.5 years. I started coming to board meetings right away. I have great respect for you, and with that comes also a great accountability for doing what I feel are the right things. And you and I have talked. I'm frustrated and saddened because it's not about you as a person, it's about the tactics that have been used, not only in forwarding emails, but the tactics that unfortunately are bleeding into our town and are making our kids, in my opinion, less safe. It is not okay for an adult to go into our schools. It is not okay for an unauthorized person to trespass in first grade classroom. We should all stand up against that as a community, as a board. That's how we get back to talking about education, as we stand up as a board and say it is not okay to get in the way of the safety of our kids, because safety has to come first. Thank you.
Jenny, anything?
I just wanted to give Jeff an opportunity to
Yeah,
speak,
okay.
but I'm happy to go first.
Oh, that's okay. First off, thank you for coming tonight. You've asked a lot of very good questions. I'm not gonna try to pretend to be able to answer all of them to your satisfaction, because I could start down one road and someone will say, well, he didn't answer the question of the way that I presented. So I do have something here that I've written. So I want to read that first, and then I want to try to figure out some way to be able to have individual dialogues with you, because I think it was Mr. Knapp had said trust is something that is fleeting. You're right, I have built a very long career here in building that trust, and I made a hell of a mistake, and I own it. I'm not trying to say it's anybody else's fault. Nobody made me do it, but let me read what I have written, and then hopefully there'll be an opportunity. And well, I'm the secretary, so I have all your names. I will reach out to you and ask if you'd like to have a conversation. And if we can, that'll be great. If you say hit the road, well, then we won't. But in the decade that I've served this board, I've always put our children first. My mantra since joining the board in 2011 has always been singular: what is in the best interest of our children? It has kept me grounded when the world's going through a spin. It keeps me planted, because it really is all about the children. It was that goal that I thought I was working toward when I forwarded the parent email. I shouldn't have done it, certainly without the sender's permission. That was wrong, and that's why I went directly to their homes and apologized in person. As the chair for nearly 7 years, I also made it my business to respond to parent concerns, whether it was in writing, over the phone, or actually physically going to someone's house. I own the mistake that I made when I forwarded the emails from distraught parents to folks who I thought that they could easily relate to. They were like-minded people. I have personally apologized to those individuals, and I was warmly greeted and actually thanked in 2 cases. But that doesn't make it right. And then I sent a letter to our Board of Education members, taking full responsibility for what I had done. The partisan attempts by some in the public to continually adjudicate this is unfortunate, because we do have a process in place that John has initiated and that I fully support, and that's a full review of all emails, not just mine, but all the emails from everyone on the Board of Education, because we certainly never ever want this to ever happen again. I have apologized, and I'm willing to meet, as I said, with each one of you at your convenience, so we can talk about it. November the 3rd follows November 2nd election. And our divided town needs to be healed. And I personally vote for healing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Anything?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. I feel as disappointed in the ire and disgust expressed by some members of our community as I was with what happened with Jeff. I feel like there is judgment. Why that needs to be, if it's gonna be recorded. You can watch the videotape afterwards. I feel like some of you are looking at us to make this decision, to kick Jeff off the board, to take a stand and toss him out the door, is the only thing that's gonna make some of you happy. And where I can understand that, I guess I would ask you to consider someone that you've worked with for 6 years, or someone that you've worked with for 10 years, or your neighbor, or a family member, or someone who is close to you that you have worked side by side with, who made an egregious error, who made a mistake, who showed an error in judgment. And I guess I would just ask you, what would you do? What would you do in that situation? You serve on a board, you serve on a committee, you have a good friend, you have a colleague, a coworker, someone who has never shown you anything but love and caring and concern for community. Someone who maybe you've argued with, because Lord knows Jeff and I have argued a lot. I mean, in the past on phone conversations, he has made in no uncertain terms that I was clearly, of all the board members, the biggest pain in the, you know what, to him, because I was always sort of taking him to task or pointing things out. We have not always seen eye to eye. But I've worked with him for 6 years, and there is a track record there. And at this point, we'll wait for the investigation to pass. We have all independently expressed our concern, our disappointment, the offense that we feel at what's happened. But I guess I disagree with the idea of tossing out everything that's come before. If your child takes discrete math, if your child likes Project Lead the Way, if you're happy with small class sizes, if you've been glad that the Board of Ed's been able to go toe to toe with the Board of Finance to try to get funding for our schools for the last decade, you know, we all have a hand in that. And I'm so saddened by all of the discourse on both sides. And the other piece that I just want to remind everyone of is kind of to Randy's point that the last however many months that I'm sorry, Dr. McKinnon, I am so sorry this has gone on as long as it has. I'm going to talk for another minute or two here. I can remember pacing my kitchen like ruts in the floor, March 2020, waiting to see if school was going to close. Phone calls, text messages, Westport's closing, Fairfield's closing, Wilton's closing, just kind of waiting for the call. Was it going to be, when was ER9 going to make that call? And if you think for a second, I know it's our administrators that are the ones who are professionals and who are doing that work for us, and we trust in them every step of the way. But if you think for a second that all of us don't feel the weight of those decisions and the weight of that responsibility for our community, while all of this is going on, you're just sadly mistaken. DEI deliberations were a nightmare. We had hundreds of people on calls, sitting there watching us like it was reality TV, passing judgment, taking our words out of context, making every facial expression, every word you said, people wanted to twist it and suit it to their own needs. And it was painful and it was not fun. And we all, I think, did the best we could. I mean, we were slandered on social media.
my words were taken and put on Instagram with suicide phone numbers next to them, with the suggestion that if you read what I said, that you might want to harm yourself. I can't tell you how that felt. After 6 years of devoted service, we were all under fire. It was a difficult time. In May of this past year, we hadn't all been in the same room, in the same place for how many months? Over a year. There had not been a single in-person, everyone in the same room, feeling each other's collective energy for our kids in all that time. And I truly believe that the isolation and the Zoom meetings and everything going on at the national level was able to seep in because we were separate and because of so many of the things that were going on. The stuff that's happening outside of Easton can only get into Easton if we let it. I would say get off social media, stop giving people a platform for the hatred that everybody's so frustrated about. And just let us get, I'm sorry, I'm going off, just let us get back to work, please.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, John.
I'll be super brief. I think I already said what I needed to say. I take this very seriously. It's important that the community trusts and has a good reason to trust the board. This is not the norm. And we are going to assess whether or not there were more serious violations that have already come to light, and I don't think that there will be. But if there are, we'll address those appropriately, and we'll do it in a transparent way. We will call a special meeting that is a public meeting, and we'll talk about what we found. I hope that people will bear with us as we do that work and not assume the worst. But if some of the worst is true, we'll be upfront about that. We'll be transparent about that. So please bear with us. Now I hope we can move on to the business of our agenda tonight. And Randy, you had an amendment?
I do want to make an addition to the agenda, and it's not because I'm president of the SMA. I'll get to that later, but I'd like to add an agenda item 6D, which I'll make a motion that the Easton BOE members discuss the use of social media by its members pertaining to various topics, including but not limited to Easton BOE members, and topics that either have been or will be up for discussion by members of the board.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second? Jenny? Okay. Discussion?
We'll add it to the, oh, you want to discuss it now and then, okay.
And here's one of the reasons why I actually think it would be more appropriate to refer this to the policy committee if we're looking for an edit, but we can sort of talk about it in 6D, and I hope that the outcome will be that we refer to the policy committee to.
I'm fine with that. I think that's probably where it belongs. And so I SMA is the social media anonymous club, so it's open to any of your members.
I thought it was some kind of mixed martial arts thing.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, people get confused.
Yeah, of
that
course.
and us, but in all seriousness, I sent a note to the board, and I'm not on social media. If I'm on Instagram, it's because I'm videoing one of my kids' soccer or hockey games. I've been shown posts by members of this board, members of other boards, townsfolk, and names I recognize in the audience, and it's disappointing. I'll leave it at that. I think the discourse needs to change. We talk about probably the number one social issue in our schools for kids. Annie? Yes, social media. We're behind our kids, but maybe not that far based on what I've been shown. So listen, my goal is that everybody's entitled to their opinion. Go on social media as much as you want. Leave the Board of Ed out of it. Leave members of the Board of Ed out of it. If you're a member of the board, members of the public, have at it. I don't think it's healthy, but that's between you and your doctor. So, but yeah, I think you're right. I think it belongs probably in a topic, a discussion in the policy, but I think it's something that, I feel relatively strong about. You and I have had dialogue about it. I've had dialogue with other members of the board, and I'm open for suggestions or criticisms, or I don't agree.
Okay.
So,
any additional discussion?
I would just suggest that if we're going to do a FOIA for email appropriate
Yeah.
training, that social media use be part of it. We have policies that govern it already in the town and
Correct.
in
Well, in the bylaws,
the bylaws, and
To-
also,
and that would be a part of that training. So, yeah, we would definitely cover that as part of that training.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor? Okay. We added 60 to our agenda, use of social media by members of the board. I'd like to move that we add 6E to the agenda, which would be to rescind the current MOA regarding the vice principal of Helen Keller Middle School serving as an 11-month position. Do I have a second? Yes, thank you, Jenny. Any discussion there before we add it? Okay, very good. Add it to the agenda. All right. Let's move on then. Reports from administration. I'm sorry. Okay. Yes.
Okay, so.
Yes, sir.
I think we'll follow the normal procedure
Okay.
and start with elementary administrators and. move up. So,
Not all offended if the room cleared out since I got it. Someone had mentioned information about social emotional learning, so actually that's where I wanted to start. Each April, May, we send a survey out to our students from grades 2 through grade 5. Most of the questions are ones that the State Department of Ed has put out. You folks have seen them year after year. One of the things that the students overwhelmingly said was that they either didn't agree with or didn't know the rules against hurting others. And that they weren't sure or didn't understand the question that there's a trusted adult. So by state mandate, we were supposed to have a building level school climate committee. And the committee had a brilliant idea. We don't have a bunch of posters, don't do this, and don't do that, and don't do this. We've always tried to take the approach of having a very positive approach to things. This is what we want you to do. This is what you need to do. But apparently in doing that, they didn't understand that you can't hit. So the committee came up with a great idea. Rather than using morning announcements, which we do every day, Michael and I think do a fabulous job keeping the kids excited about all the news of the day. They created a video, not using photographs of the students in the building, but using cute little emoticons, talking about what we want kids to do and what they can't do. And then we had probably 10 or 11 different staff members each take a slide and narrate that slide. It came out really adorable. We sent it to the staff to share with their kids outside of the morning announcements and with central office. Did the board of ed members get a copy as well? I don't know if you have
think so.
interest in spending 6 minutes listening to the staff members talk about.
What else
You
is
can't
there?
hit, and you gotta get along with everybody, but it's really, really cute. So we think it's gonna make a really positive impact. What we're also trying to do in the morning announcements, we have photographs of all of our staff members, is use their photograph and use their name concurrently, so the kids have an understanding. There's a lot of people in our building. From the 2 staff supervisors in the kitchen, to the 4 people who are on the playground, to everyone else that they see over the course of the day. It's a very big school with a lot of staff members, and it's really important for kids to know who these adults are. So we're gonna try to use that refrain. These are some trusted adults that you might wanna go to if you have a question or a concern. So I will send that to you tomorrow. We are seeing in Mrs. Desiderio, who's our school social worker, to a lesser degree, Mrs. Charles, who is our school psychologist. A lot more younger kids are seeing them in kindergarten and grade 1. Some of it is, we've seen as I looked at the Q folders of all of the incoming kindergartners, there were quite a few that didn't go to preschool this past year, or if they did, they didn't go until April or May or June. So we're noticing that some of the kids are having some difficulty separating from mom or dad in the car. And we have them come out onto the curbing, that's a little bit more than usual. Or when the task that we have in front of them is a little bit longer in length than they're used to, maybe it requires a little bit more of a cognitive demand than they're used to, a little bit more teary, and then they want to see mom.
So we're finding that we're pushing in a little bit more than we used to around October. Today we started our SIT meetings to talk about mostly academic, but there were a few kids who had really young kids who had some real anxiety about being at school for the length of day that they are in school. So I just thought that was an important thing for you to know. And we do think it might have something to do with the fact that the preschool experience was very unique than we've had in years past. The other interesting thing that we're seeing, I think that we're beginning to understand that some of these kids, someone had mentioned it earlier in their remarks, that they only know life through this pandemic. They only know us through our masks. I think I mentioned it last week, we have 36 new kids in our school, and they haven't seen the second half of my face. So we need to do a little bit more outside, like when I need to go outside and talk to them, along with art teachers and music teachers to a greater degree, so they can actually see who we are. That's a big part of making connections with people. A smile goes a long way. I also wanted to share, last Friday we had a full PD day. Most of our day was spent, the elementary teachers with Envision Math, that's the company who does the training. That day was really one of the most phenomenal of the 3 sessions that they've given our teachers. They learned ways to enhance instruction using the math program. The instructor provided some wonderful overview of the digital manipulatives that the program offers. And they helped teachers with a way to strategize the solve and share. So there is student-to-student discourse. That's a big part of the program. And given some of the restrictions that we have, keeping kids at distance, the teachers have found beautiful ways to do a turn and talk where they're not up close and personal with their knee partner or their elbow partner, which was vernacular that we once used. Those conversations are taking place. So we're really, really happy with the training. And then the fall universal screenings are completed. Today I did most of the K. I have one more K class to go through, and I did all of the first. The first grade numbers were really, really large in the area of reading. Of course, we keep what their last reading level was when they left us in June. There were a lot of kids who lost some, but some of that is expected in some kids. They lose a little bit over the course of the summer. We're hoping that these kids don't all need to be picked up, but right now the group sizes are larger than they were before. We have mostly groups of 4 right now in reading intervention at the first grade level. I haven't done any of the second grades. Those I'll do tomorrow. The math, we do try to keep the math intervention one-on-one. It is very difficult to combine students who need math intervention because invariably their math needs are so different, or we have the student over here who's shooting out the answer quickly or the wrong answer quickly, which then complicates the conversation when you're having a real young learner who really needs help. So most of that has to be one-on-one. But having said that, along with Stephanie Holroyd, who's the math specialist, we also have one person who has been our full-time math assistant through Title I grant money for several years now. We have a part-time person who's in the Board of Ed budget, and we hired a full-time math assistant with the ESSER grant funding this past year, which is going to last for 2 years. So with all of these people, we're able to sort of spread out a little bit more and do one-on-one with those kids. Hope is that after a 6 or 8 week cycle, we do what's called a data probe to find out if they are moving forward. We all come together mid-cycle, look at what's called progress monitoring to see if the frequency, the materials, the intensity is the right match. And if the student is meeting that target, then we can release them so that we can pick up other kids. Yep.
Before you jump to the next thing, Kim, does this allow us to sort of catch up? Does this allow us to get to where we need to be for a certain subpopulation? Like there's been comments in the audience and the board has the same thing. We all feel like we fell behind a little bit, and whether that's segregated to 20 kids or 200, how does this, because the obvious question is the money runs out in 2 years on one of these individuals. What happens then? Are we caught up or?
For another profession? I don't know. I'm gonna be honest, the K1 conversations, I'm not certain that I can answer that question because they've only been in school for a year. I can tell you in the older kids, remember the learning model changed quite a bit last year. We went from hybrid to all in, to all out, to all in. There were some kids, you recall, who never came back. Plus, we had some kids who were very new. We have kids upstairs in third, fourth, and fifth grade who I can tell you lost ground because the model wasn't the right match for them. There's no replacing in-person learning. The other thing that's a little bit tricky in answering your question is it's a new math program. One of the things I had said to the parents during back to school night, this will be my third math program in my 18 years. And what is always goes hand in hand when you have a new math program is you don't know if all of the data you're getting for this readiness test, this universal screening, is a result of it's a new math program, new language, new expectations, or if it's an outcome of something else, if it's a need. In some cases, it's a reading need, not really a math need. They're having difficulty reading the problem. So some of that is going to be growing pains, and we will keep looking at it closely. We're probably going to have to meet a little bit more frequently to look at the mapped data. The universal screening showed a lot of kids don't have number sense. We have to figure out why. We probably won't know more about it until we're a bit further into the program.
Kim, a question?
Yep,
She answered
yep,
the question?
yep.
For those children that do catch on and do have the ability to catch on quickly, are there programs or processes to help them be challenged?
Yeah, in fact, the new math program is fantastic with that. It offers an awful lot in the area of enrichment and advancement for the kids.
Great.
A lot of stuff in it.
Great.
Devin?
So just a quick comment, feedback question. I just noticed, and again, sample size is small, a lot of queuing off pictures as opposed to decoding letter like sounds. And just, I've heard it from a couple other friends in terms of like young kids, like when I'm doing reading, instead of queuing off the word, they're queuing off the picture, and just making this rando guess that is even like, it's like that's not even close. So like just, I know we use Foundations, obviously amazing phonics program, really great. And just wanted to make sure too that we're just reminding even in those leveled readers that we're still queuing off of.
There's other strategies that need to be employed.
Yeah.
Yep, you're right.
And one other quick question, just so with the universal screening data, I know that I think it's on our agenda, Dr. McKinnon's going to talk some about assessment. Will we be able to see, you know, some, I know it's really challenging last year, obviously with COVID, the year before there was no end of year data, like any kind of year over, some sort of like trajectory or growth. Sorry, I was in Chicago this morning. I'm very tired.
What content are you talking about?
Just in math and reading, trying to really understand what has happened to students. So 2018-19 normal school year. Where were we into the beginning of the year 2018-19? Where were we at the end of that year? What happened in the beginning of the year 2019-20? Did we have any middle year data pre like so we can just see some
Yes.
linear
I will tell you that last year's not going to be a fair
totally
amount of
agree.
information because we either couldn't do the reading assessment face to face, or we only were able to get to half of the kids. There were huge subproblems. We couldn't get the teachers released to go out to the hallway to do the assessment with the kids. So we don't have the data to compare, but I can give you trends in years prior. And you more than anyone probably know what the national expectations are for, you know, fall, winter, and spring in terms of their F&P level.
Yeah. No, I think it would be helpful just to see, because I think there's lots of really important questions. I think I have some questions about math later, but I'll drive somebody else crazy about that. Just where are we? Because I feel like there's a lot of fear. It feels like there's some angst and fear around, oh my gosh, we've lost ground. And it's hard as a parent to know, like, well, have we lost 6 months of ground? Have we lost 6 weeks of ground? And so what can I do at home to support? Because I think there's lots of really motivated parents who want to support their kids. And so what can we do at home to really?
So it's great that you asked that question because one of the things we told the teachers at the end of every sit meeting today is when you make the call to tell the parent this is the decision, remember to also include, these are some strategies that we'd like to see them do at home to help support the work we're doing here in school.
Awesome.
Yeah. In terms of parents actually finding out what those data numbers are, that'll probably be the focus for the November parent-teacher conference.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Okay, Steve.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking to you all about what's been going on at Expeller for the last month. Really kind of settling into a nice routine now. With looking at current absence and party rates, always a good indicator, early indicator of how things are going. Absences seem to be at pre-pandemic levels, so kind of normal amount of absences, which is great. Parties are starting to tick up, which is also kind of typical for this time of year. We start to get a little bit of rise in some of the parties. Mrs. Moore has a great system in place for getting the kids in a little extra early and doing some extra help in the morning to try to get those in. We thought it might be tied to some of there's of course, an increase in the number of drop-offs in the morning. So we've been out there every morning and been out there with Easton PD trying to rectify that. There's some coordination when the buses are leaving and stops people from getting out that ties things up a bit. But the last 2 weeks, we've had everybody out of the circle and all the buses in by 8:02. So that's pretty good for that's pretty good considering all the vehicles that are in and out of the campus every day. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll keep working with everybody to try to make sure they're in. We do know there's a direct tie between performance, achievement, learning, and attendance, right? So one of the basic indicators we always want to look at is where our attendance and party. Just a few minutes late to school really can mess the day up too. I think the favorite part of the day for at Keller has become the lunch mask break, where we've had some basketball games going on, pickup football games. I've been out there with the kids playing music. It's my favorite part of the day, and it's been great to see the kids out there actually enjoying that. And so we're looking to bolster that program and try to add some more activities. So what happens when we're all inside, once the weather isn't so good, and we can add some good social interaction time and some kind of downtime so the kids to appropriately interact with each other there. But it's become a great part of the day. Walk to School Day was last week, was last Wednesday, National Walk to School Day. It was a great turnout. I had over 80 families who participated. It was wonderful. No one was late to school that day, I think, because we had everybody so many people walked in. It was a wonderful day out there, and wanted to give special thanks to Chief Doyle and for providing extra help there on that. And all of our extracurricular activities have also started up, and they're very robust. Every day now we have dozens of kids after school playing ultimate frisbee. We have peer leadership today. The newspaper club is just getting started with Mrs. Burke. It's a wonderful new program. So all these extracurricular programs, great. They're all funded and fully operational. We actually have requests for additional extracurriculars that we're trying to get some funds for, so we can get all of those running. We also do have all of our support programs up and running, including a new program we started last year called Learning Lab. Learning Lab is designed for students who need a little help with the executive functioning part of middle school, organizing themselves, assignments, long-term assignments, short-term. We have some staff who are designated to work with kids kind of towards the end of the day every day, making sure they have all their stuff together so they can leave and be successful. And that's shown a lot of promise. And that's in addition to our regular intervention program, our SIT program, that actually the numbers are quite high. It's the highest numbers we've had, not surprisingly, considering where we saw some of our scores coming. So we've had 2 SIT meetings already, and we've looked at a comprehensive set of data from the end of last year through the beginning of this year to identify students, and the students who aren't meeting our benchmarks. And not, the board won't be surprised to hear that our numbers are higher than they've been in the past. And that's both, concerning, but also the system is working for identifying kids, we're giving them the supports they need. The intervention programs do have a successful track record. So we're hopeful that we can close some of those gaps that we know have existed or developed over the last year and a half or so. Just a quick update on new staff. We do have finally a permanent sub for the building, permanent building sub who hopefully will be finishing all of his paperwork on Friday. So that'll be good because there's a lot of absences that are required that are coming up from staff. Kristen Burnham is our long-term sub in for Sarah Terry. Sarah Terry is our new counselor this year. She's on maternity leave.
Kristen Burnham has just done an outstanding job of filling in for her. She just kind of fit in naturally. She had high school counseling experience in the past. She had been home raising her kids and was looking to get back into the game, and has just done a fabulous job. Also, just wanted to note that for her. And we also have a new daily sub. I just want to recognize people who are signing up for subbing. It's a little brave to come in during all this and do that. Alyssa Diadone has come in and filled in a bunch of spots already and has already been very valuable. So I just wanted to thank her. We still do have some open staff positions. I do want the board to, I don't know what the board can do, but for our school security officer, we still do not have a school security officer. So Easton PD is still operating with that. I think that's going to eventually be an expensive line item because they're paying time and a half to police officer to be here all day, which is much more expensive than our school security officer. I think what's holding up, we do have one candidate in the queue, but what's holding him up is some requests for some personal time in this contract that he doesn't have. He's not part of one of our unions, so kind of an individual contract, but we could really use him to have a couple of normal personal days and maybe some sick leave that is not in his contract. I think that might be, and maybe a couple more dollars an hour. I think that would probably bring him over and get him in. We'd love to have someone, the same person here every day. No, Easton PD has been amazing. The Chief Doyle has been so supportive of this, and it's great having one of Easton PD here every day, all day long. But I do think it's the cost effective that is going to come.
Dr. Platt, what's the procedure there? Is that something that comes before?
We need to hear from the superintendent and understand what the needs are there and next steps. Yep.
Steve, do you have any idea what the magic dollar amount is? Because I think the current contract is 30K.
I'm not exactly sure, but I know that because the school security officer carries the firearm, has to carry personal liability insurance, and I know that that's cost prohibitive. So I think I don't know. I haven't negotiated with the candidate. Maybe Vicky Ms. Frank can add some light to what that magic number might be.
I can look into that. We, in previous school districts that I've worked with, we've had SSOs and ASOs. And SROs obviously a police officer and an armed security officer. I could look into what the dollar amount per hour is, whether the person requires benefits or not benefits, and what their testing requirement is for their firearms. So I can get that information and get back to you if you like.
Because the way it was originally set up was the SSO was going to be getting trained through the Eastern Police Force, and while they obviously were working in here, but there was always a dotted line to the Eastern Police. So if there's anything more that needs to be done, certainly we want to have someone here who's going to be consistent and the kids can get to know and
we also have a cafeteria supervisor position, and we're always looking to do stuff. We do have a line on a couple of good library media specialists, paraprofessionals as our district title. So enrollment update, we have one new 8th grader who's joined our ranks since last month. So that's 8th grade is up to 113 students with 316 students here every day. Just about. We have some exciting upcoming family events. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., the principal's PTO coffee. We had probably 60 or 70 last time. Standing room only out of the 10. So hopefully we'll have a good show tomorrow. It's kind of open agenda, show up, talk. It was almost like a support group for middle school parents where people were saying, hey, I'm struggling with this. And then we shot ideas around and it was really helpful. It's not nothing super, it's not a super presentation or nothing fancy agenda. It's just people talking about having middle school kids and how we get through these years together as a community. We also, this Thursday night, Sarah Stefani and who's the new district tech integrator and Andy are hosting or co-hosting a parent tech workshop. This is good if you want to know more about how Power School and all the features of Power School and Google Classroom kind of work together and provide parents with lots of good information. I will tell you this as a former teacher. We would put lots of comments onto assignments. And it's a little tricky to find it, but there's a lot of great information on every single assignment that a teacher puts a comment on, you can really get a lot of good information. So Sarah and Minnie are gonna be hosting that Thursday night at 7 o'clock. That'll be on Zoom. Next Thursday, the 21st, we have the Massachusetts Aggression Reduction Center out of Bridgewater State, Massachusetts, who will be running a workshop for parents about cyberbullying in particular, but also social media and the dangers of that. During our PD day last week, we had some great training from them, really fresh insights, new data on an organization that is dedicated to studying the impact that social media screens have on students and their behaviors. So it's excellent information, very insightful for parents. Really encouraging you to meet us the 21st. And again, that's on Zoom. That'll be with Dr. Elizabeth England out of Bridgewater State. And she really knows her stuff, and she opened a lot of our eyes to even the people who are really engaged in studying this. So I really like to encourage parents to get to that. And then it looks like we're settled on the 17th of November for a screenagers, a district-wide screenagers screening. I think that's getting close, which will be a great, another opportunity to do that. Also, lots of new volunteer opportunities at Helen Keller. We're doing Miss Gail, our new library specialist, would love some parent volunteers to come in and help. She's been going through all the stats, and the library hasn't really fully been used in a couple of years. So she's pulling out books, and there's cobwebs and lots of stuff like that. We just don't have the manpower to really, or the person power to really to clean all those out and really get it reorganized and thin some of that stuff out. So she would love some help. We'd love to have some parents come in and help with that work. And I'm also trying to organize a mask break coordinator. So we have a mask break outside. Someone wants to get a kickball game going or something like that. We'd love to have some parents who want to help with that. And I'm hoping to have one other chance for parents to come in and give some insights and guest speaker opportunities for them at the tower as well. And finally, I just want to recognize Kathy Santangeli, who has done some amazing work with beautification out front. I don't know if you noticed the gardens coming in, but she on not much of a budget, she can make a lot of magic happen out there. So it's become a really great sense. She's tireless effort at it. She's out there herself. Sometimes I expect to find her out there with a shovel digging up some of the big rocks out there, but she just did a beautiful job, has a beautiful vision for that out there. So I really want the board to recognize her and thank her work.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Yep, sure.
The outdoor classroom, I think there was some discussion about being able to put a roof on that so that the kids can enjoy the.
Yes, I remember that meeting quite well. It was the meeting I was appointed at. So yes, yeah, the material was delayed, and so we're looking the first week in November for material delivery.
Okay.
We still expect to be able to put it up, barring any like heavy frosts that come in early November, but we should be able to still get some good use out of it the last few weeks of November before the weather really turns.
Okay, thank you.
And stair treads also, all the stair treads in the school are going to be redone. We've ordered that. That's on last year's budget as well. That material is coming in next week, but we need like 3 days to install it without the kids in the building. So it's probably going to be installed over Thanksgiving, is what I'm hoping. Thanksgiving break. Yeah.
Can you just give an update on where we are with math testing for the fall?
With math?
Yeah.
Measures of academic performance, yeah. So the end of the year, our math tests are completed in 6th and 7th grade. We've got all scores in. As you know, 8th grade does not take the math scores. They do the PSAT, which is also completed. So we've gotten the results in from that, and we'll be sending out parent letters with those results shortly, as we typically do, I assume, when we get to all those results. And we had some stragglers who had to get through the whole process, and we have to get our district norms, and we can't get those until everybody's completed the testing. So it takes a little while for us to get those last few kids through the test. But the thing that we're already using that information in our SIT as well, analysis, see where kids are.
Steve, I think we had set aside $175,000 for capital improvements. We were hoping to have those done over the summer.
Yeah.
Do you have an update on that, or?
I do not actually. I talked to Dr. McKenna a little bit about that as he's been coming on board. There was an evaluation done of the school in terms of its some of the major projects that might need to happen in terms of water flow and ventilation. That was done over Rosh Hashanah, I want to say, or Yom Kippur. I can't remember which holiday it was done. The group was here and did that work. I believe that report's due in shortly, next week or so. I have not seen it yet or heard from them, but that will determine how that money, what the next level will be, the evaluation of work that needs to be done.
That's great, thank you.
All right.
Any other questions?
I guess, I
Yeah,
don't know if
please,
it's
Jenny.
necessarily a question, it's more for the board, I mean, what are we within our rights to do, but how can we help with some of the filling of the needs for
Yeah.
people in the building? I know the PTO has been on
Mhm.
social media, putting postings, trying to get folks involved. I just don't know sort of like how that falls within the work that we do, or if there's something more in the way of resources or manpower that we can support and supply the central office to, to try to bring the folks in that we need. And I think certainly given discourse earlier this evening and just things going on in the community, there's a real concern about safety and security and connections for kids. So the sooner we can get the officer secured in the building. So what do we need to do as a board, or what can we do as a board to approve the funding to hire this person who's interested?
I completely agree that there's urgency to it, and I think the right path is that our principal here goes to the superintendent and says, here's what I need, and the superintendent comes to the board and says, either here's what I'm doing because it's under a budget amount and sort of within the bounds of what we can spend, or says, hey, I need you guys to convene a special meeting and get together and approve this package of funding. Does that sound right to you as well, Dr.
Right,
McKenna?
I mean, I have to see the contract, if you have a contract that is for this position. And what's the reason for this person or people in the past not taking it? Is it purely salary? The amount they earn per hour? Are they looking for benefits? And what the benchmarks in the area? Because I hired an ASO I interviewed probably in May for these two positions. I got probably 4 or 5 applications, and I picked someone and hired someone. But I don't know whether that was significantly more or less than what you're describing here and what that person's looking for. So I think that we need to come talk about it and look at the contract and see whether we can increase or not. So in the meantime, children are safe because you have a security presence at school. It's just costing more. So that's important.
I certainly didn't mean to suggest that
No.
they weren't.
No, of course not. No.
At this time.
And we know, especially because our new director of finance and operations hasn't started yet, that there's a heavy load on the folks in central office. And so it's difficult to say, oh, and do this, but this is important. And if the board can send a message that says, hey, this is something that we will take very seriously, and if it means also saving some money for the district because we can get a resource that is of high quality, but also, reasonable cost to it, then we'll get together, we'll do a special meeting, we'll do whatever we can to make that happen.
We're not the only ones facing the ego.
I know.
Other folks
Right.
out there. There's a good national article about schools everywhere, having trouble filming. But I appreciate the parent support. It's been great in getting the message out there. I think that's why we're finding a few recent applicants to do our sub pools. So it's been great.
Nice.
And trying more creative marketing methods. We're trying to go back to universities that are creative teachers and giving them, how can we partner with you and get you into the school and you can apply what you're learning in our setting and then bring it back to your coursework. So.
John, I was given 2 or 3 messages, I think it was 3 actually, from parents who have children here. And Annie always brings the energy, but whatever you're doing, whatever you brought to the table is being noticed, and it's energy and enthusiasm, and I think it's fantastic, and I want to pass that along. Okay, so thank you. And Annie?
Thank you very much. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening. I actually don't have much to report today. It's been a very typical October. We've been convening our P2 meeting. The only thing that I do want to bring your attention to is we do see an uptick in our P2 meetings from last year. We had about 15 to about 20 this year.
And I think Kim spoke eloquently, we're seeing more and more kids being referred younger. And it's not because of academic concerns, it's because of the social emotional needs, so. We've been really trying to work with the preschools and the parents to make sure these kids are fully supported. Again, these are 3 or 4 year olds, we have responsibility to, we're just trying to make sure that our staff can give them the tools, so that when they do come to state board next year, they are in a better position to be open to the right process. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brief, given the time of the evening. First thing I'd like to share is that one of the many things that we've reinstated this year that feels a little bit more like normal is our more typical evaluation plan. You might remember that in the year 1920 and also in the year 2021, we did not provide the teachers their typical end of year summative feedback. And last year, the way that we provided feedback to all of our teachers was through informal observations, which many felt was extremely useful, and some felt actually it was more useful in some ways than having a number placed on their formal observation. This year, the state provided us some options, and our PDEC committee met. We had 2 meetings actually, and they really felt that, especially given the number of new staff that we have with us, that going on 3 years without a typical evaluation system would be doing a disservice to our teachers, that we need to be providing more comprehensive feedback. We need to go back to more of an academic focus, which was really the strong support of the full committee that's made up of teachers, administrators from the building and the central office. So while the state did provide us some flexibility again this year, we all felt strongly that while social emotional support and family engagement supports achievement, that the focus will be on academics, more front and center once again. So you'll see that return in our evaluation plan. You won't personally see the evaluation plan be implemented, but certainly you'll feel the fruits of its labor. In terms of our curriculum update, we'll be taking a look at the site. I want to make it clear that this is the first step of many in the delayed implementation of the curriculum website update, which was stalled because of the pandemic and our changeover from the Atlas sort of electronic database to what we'll begin to look at this evening. Tonight, you will see some examples of the content areas that are now available to parents. And that was really based on input and feedback that we received from both boards of education, Easton and Reading, the curriculum committees, and also through the K-12 curriculum steering committee. We really talked for a long time about the audience for these curriculum documents and what was most useful and what was probably information overload for parents. So what does a parent most want to see in terms of public information? And so that really guided our work. We will continue to add subject areas. You know that in a small place like Easton, we don't have a tremendous amount of curriculum coordination. So that falls on me, and then through my work directly with teachers. So for instance, in the area of social studies, that work is more hands-on, working really directly with the teachers in order to change the formatting. I want to make it clear that what you're seeing does not represent a curriculum change. This is just making information that was previously available through Atlas available in a new format. No substantial changes in the actual curriculum content. So we will continue to do that work in the other subject areas. And then there'll be a number of other phases in terms of that curriculum development on the website. So including more parent resources, the video that Mrs. Fox-Santor highlighted, that was an example of a wonderful climate video, which will be placed on the climate website once we debut that. And then we have some math presentation videos, which will be made available on the curriculum website. So more parent resources, more videos for those who like to learn in that way. And then ultimately to include the student voice. We'd love to see kids explaining how they learn, showing some of the examples of their the products of their learning, and having that be part of the curriculum website as well. So you will see that develop over time. In the area of safe school climate, you heard some examples of climate committee work at Samuel Staples. All of the building committees at this point have either had their first meeting or are about to have their first meeting. Those committees include staff members, parents, and students really taking a look at the district goals to inform building goals, thinking about more specifically the needs of the building and the right way to support our students. So you heard a really concrete example from Samuel Staples, and that really highlights the good work, getting directly to kids, creating a video, being sure that the areas of need are being addressed on an everyday basis, not just through an annual measurement. That was a wonderful example that we heard about already. And with that, I'll save the rest for when we get into the other presentation.
Any questions for Dr. Christie?
Just thank you for getting
Thank
the
you.
curriculum stuff up.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. If you could bring up the superintendent survey presentation. Okay, well, it's so nice to be in a community where everyone has so much to say. And one of the very first things that I've done over the last couple of weeks is to begin to meet with some key stakeholders. So you can see that I have created an Instagram account, created a Facebook account, and begun to introduce myself to the community, which started in the schools, bringing a marsupial in, which was well received by the students and the staff. And the other things I started to do was to just collect some preliminary information from the community about, where should a superintendent focus their time? So if you go to the next survey, this was a survey that I sent out probably at the end of the first week that I was here. This first question just asks, what school does your child attend? And essentially, the survey is evenly distributed mostly amongst the 5 areas. The next key question was, what is the best way for the district to stay in communication with you? If you go to the next slide. Oh, look at it.
Yeah, you can drive. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, great. So what is the best way for the district to stay in communication with you? Email was the preferred method, followed by text messages. So you can see here that I am interested in learning how we communicate with each other, but I don't want this to be a one-way dialogue. We do need to create opportunities for there to be a lot of public engagement around various topics. So I do intend to create a communication plan and to roll that out with our Director of Technology and Digital Learning, Mrs. Scafani soon. But these are the types of questions that I'm going to be asking. How do you want to be communicated? What is your preferred method? And you can see that certainly emails and texts are the most preferred method right now. But that will include, obviously, a robust social media platform where I engage with students on Instagram, I engage with parents on Facebook, and then we start thinking about ways we can have these important conversations in dialogues. The next question is, how well informed do you feel about issues impacting children in the district and education? 7.9% said that parents feel they feel extremely informed. 32% said they feel quite informed, and about 50% said they feel somewhat informed about issues impacting their education. But this is the reason why I'm asking these questions is because I'm interested in developing a baseline now, and then putting a communication plan into effect and seeing if we can actually move these criteria. Next question is, there are adequate opportunities for me to express my concerns about issues impacting the district. Only 7.9% of respondents agree, 63% agree, about a quarter disagree that there are adequate ways to express concerns about issues impacting the district. This is impossible to see, and I apologize, but essentially it's a question that I asked And I organized, I basically said, as a new superintendent, which area should I prioritize this year? And I listed things like high quality instruction, social emotional learning, health and safety, communication with families, curriculum development, diversity, equity, inclusion, teacher professional development, developing a strong vision for the future, home-school connections and community partnerships. And essentially, from that data set, I sorted all of those responses and ranked them according to someone's first choice, second, third, fourth, and fifth choice. You can see the bar on the left is that overwhelmingly people feel like we need to focus on high quality instruction and student achievement on the left. So that was by far the most respondents, but it also had the number one choice. All the way on the far column, which had the lowest out of the 10 rankings, was community partnerships. Now, let me just emphasize that doesn't mean that community partnerships are not important, because they are, and they are important to me as well. But when you look at all of these different categories, from social emotional learning to high quality instruction and student achievement and so on, this is where these categories fall. So I can share this with you so you can see it, certainly share it with the public. In reality, we need to focus on all of these things. But what do we focus on first? And that's really important, because an entry plan usually looks at my time here in the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and so on. So again, these are just data to inform, what do you value as a community, and kind of how do you feel about different topics. There was an open-ended portion of the survey as well. I collected a lot of qualitative data about how the community members wanted to preserve certain things about their community and certain things that they wanted to change. But the one thing the one theme that emerged was that everyone really loved their communities and their schools. That I can break that data apart in future meetings. There were questions I asked about the schools. The school environments are supporting and caring. 7% strongly agree, 63% disagree, 23% disagree. Sorry, 7% strongly agree, 63% agree, 23% disagree. So, I want to delve into that question a little bit more. I know that the schools conduct their own climate surveys as well, and I'd like to talk to Dr. Pearson Hugo about some of the data that we're seeing. Another question is, if my child requires support, there was someone at the school that can help them. 32% agree, 32% strongly agree, 56% agree, 9.8% disagree. So overwhelmingly, over 80%, 85 to 90% of parents strongly agree or disagree that if your child requires support, there's someone at the school that can help. Another question was, how confident are you in your ability to support your child's learning at home? And so this question is interesting coming up the pandemic. 27% felt extremely confident, but 34% felt quite comfortable, and then 30% said they felt somewhat confident supporting. And obviously parents have, depending on their circumstances at home, they all have a different skill set about how they can support their child's learning. So I love the idea of having conversations and parent information topics about different ways that we can support a child's learning at home with families.
Again, is this all K through 12?
This is K through 12.
Okay. Most people don't feel confident with high school math anyway, so.
There are high expectations for my children in this district. This is clearly important. 90% of people in this community in Easton and Reading feel confident that there are high expectations for their children in this district. Does your child feel like they belong at his or her school? 48% said they feel tremendous belonging. 50% said they feel somewhat belonging. And that little orange sliver there, which is about 2%, unfortunately, there are some children who do not feel like they belong at school. And 2% of any number is too many. right? We really need to know, what that means. So there's some really promising news there. And I know that as educators and as leaders, we care deeply about the kids who feel like they don't fit in, right? Teaching and learning are of a high quality, 31% agree, strongly agree, 61% agree. That's over 90% of people feel like teaching and learning are of a high quality in this community. And I think that's really important. And that's why Easton, Reading, Region 9 are a part of a group of schools that are best, the best in the state. You've all heard of it, the district reference group. And I think that's why we're all here. That's a very good, sorry, I didn't change the slide, but that's a very good data point.
Can we go back to that previous slide for just a second, Dr. McKinnon?
Actually, John, I can't.
Maybe, that's okay.
You could scroll up down, but yeah, Devin's got it.
There we go.
Okay. This is a question framed to the parent that they ask their child if they feel like they belong. How is this question framed?
This question was framed to parents, not to children. And the question was, does your child feel like they belong at his or her school? And the breakdown,
okay.
Parents feel like his or her child, there's tremendous belonging, 48.9%, or somewhat belonging, 50%. 2%.
I don't even like someone.
Right.
That's right. Yes.
I don't know if this is the right time to mention, but as I'm watching these slides, my natural inclination is to want to see a breakdown by grade level.
Right.
Because the responses of, is this, is it adolescent, is it childhood, is it high school? I think it has a really significant impact on the discussion surrounding the results from quite a few, from a lot of these conversations.
Right. Again, this is me taking a quick snapshot in the first 2 weeks that I'm in the district, and it gives me a sense of what do we need to focus on, what do I need to get more information about, and you raising these questions are the same questions I'm raising, which are which schools, which grade levels, what are the other climate surveys that we're doing in our schools, how we're using that information. I think that, I think they're really important. So this is the climate and how students feel is obviously a very important focus of the district. This is the Easton PTA. We had a great meeting. I'm meeting with the Reading PTA tomorrow. Many more meetings to come. We had a great first couple of weeks. This is just coming to the, I think that's Helen Keller.
Yep.
That's a PTA Reading. Just been to a lot of events. That's the Easton. That's the my Instagram page and Facebook account, and just a couple of notes from Samuel Staples. Dr. McKinnon, thank you for bringing the kangaroo. I love how soft it was. In my life, I never thought I would ever see a kangaroo. Dr. McKinnon, thank you so much for bringing 2 kangaroos. It was so fluffy, I would say. It was more fuzzy than my dog, and my dog is not that fluffy. And my sister saw one baby kangaroo on 28th. She said it was fluffy. She took some videos, but thank you so much. You were a really nice superintendent. So that's my superintendent report. I would just say in general, I'm just in the information gathering stages so far. And so I have a lot more questions. I plan to have more conversations with different stakeholder groups once we get the finance director on board and we get some of those issues sorted out.
Monday? Next Monday?
Monday, yes.
Yes, please.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
6 days, 9 hours.
Yeah,
37
exactly.
minutes, 14 seconds.
That is correct. I'll take the mouse unless.
Oh, you need that too.
Okay, yeah.
And you'll send us a copy.
We're going to the other.
I think you can. So I'm not quite sure how long the administrators stay. They've seen this presentation. We talked to them about it today. I'm not, you thoughts of what to say?
I see Randy, let's buy them first.
Yes, you guys can go. Sleep
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
We don't have any agenda items.
Thank you.
Push it.
That's what I want here, so we don't have to do all of them. Exactly.
179.
But that screen is playing it too, so if you sat there, yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Comfortable? All right. So I think this presentation is really about our standardized test achievement scores from grades 3 through 8. And we're going to talk a little bit about some 5-year trend data and most specifically about our smarter balanced assessment scores from last year. And the point we want to make is that if we all care about student achievement, then we all should pay particular attention to how students are achieving on some of these measures. This presentation is going to raise more questions than we have answers for. I just want to alert you right now to that point. Part A is really just talking about a set of assessments, the type of assessments, and some next steps. We do need to follow up with a part B, a follow-up to this presentation in November, and talk more about district and school goals and what they look like as a result of the information I'm about to present tonight. Okay, so tonight is really more about the data, and then the next meeting is more about the action steps and the goals and what we're doing with the data, right? Because you know, we're just presenting some of these data for the first time to our administrators and to you.
So we're familiar at this point with the Smarter Balanced Assessment. The Smarter Balanced Assessment is given to students in grades 3 through 8. It includes assessments of English language arts and mathematics. The mathematics side of the assessment also includes a performance task. And while there's only one test for English language arts and there are 2 tests for math, it is computer adapted. So that means that it might take students more than 1 session to complete. On average, students take up to 1 to 2 sessions, with a few students going into a 3rd session. So whereas our legacy assessment, the Connecticut Mastery Test, was timed and it was given on a certain day and students completed as many items as they could and then the test was taken away. With this assessment, it's adaptive. The adaptive nature of the assessment really is, in my opinion, healthier for the student, right? So as the student is taking the test, if they experience success, then the problems get successively more difficult and the student remains engaged and can continue to rise up to a certain level, you know, within the span of standards on that grade level where we expect mastery. If the student struggles through the items, then the test sort of levels out. So the students can continue to take the test without feeling a great sense of, oh my gosh, I sat down to take a test and there's just nothing that I can do, right? So it does allow us to get a lot of information about what our students have mastered. The other state assessment in the spring is the Next Generation Science Assessment. That's also administered on the computer, but it's not adaptive. We'll say that from student to student, they might not take the exact same assessment. So if I'm sitting next to my classmate Jason and I can see his computer screen, he's not taking the same test that I'm taking. And that's given in grades 5 and in grades 8.
Okay, great. So just to clarify, student assessment can be sorted in 2 categories: formative assessment and summative assessment. Formative assessment occurs during learning and can be measured by the teacher to improve learning while it takes place. And summative assessment occurs after learning has taken place. For example, the summative assessments are really the smarter balance assessments that we're talking about tonight. They were administered over 4 months ago during the pandemic, right? So the formative assessments are the assessments that really measure learning as it's occurring in the classroom. And so it's really important for a district to have good formative assessments in place, because that is how you impact student achievement.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Can we also do diagnostic assessment, like the beginning? I mean, would you summarize that as formative? Or just like, it's just not on there because it's not?
It might depend on what type of diagnostic assessment it is. If you're doing an FMP benchmark assessment and you're doing a running record, then a teacher could give feedback to that student right away. If you're doing, say, an NWEA assessment and you're doing it 3 times a year, it may be more summative and normed against some local and state norms. So it really depends on how the teacher uses that information, right?
But you guys are doing something in the beginning, like roughly now, NWE math or PSAT or the assessment DIBELS, or I don't remember what the math one is. I just want the public to understand, like, you do something in the beginning that helps diagnose where students are, so you can also like use that to eventually tier.
There are
Right.
very few assessments that we give that are purely summative. In fact, even the state
would still be,
standardized measure, while that's a summative assessment, we are still analyzing those results and then either confirming or questioning those results by looking at formative measures that we give in the fall. So certainly the diagnostic, and then many of our benchmark assessments, in some cases, you could say, well, you're measuring progress at 3 points in the year or 2 points in the year. So it has a summative value for us, but it's still informing instruction. Yeah.
I like this slide because it talks a little bit about how much impact a certain assessment has on student learning. And the large square is basically classroom formative assessment has more impact on student achievement versus more large scale accountability measures, like the smarter balance assessments, right? So if you were going to put an impact and associate that to a particular type of assessment, formative assessment and classroom formative assessments impact student learning more than the large scale accountability measures. This is just a sample timeline. I know it's difficult to see, but this is a unit of math instruction for the entire year, different colors representing major units. And you could say there are various assessments throughout a unit. An assessment at the end of a unit may be a benchmark, and you may have 4 major benchmarks in a year, but you have these little assessments throughout a particular unit that are really important for teachers to pay attention to. And the hallmark of a really successful district is that a district has these benchmarks and has criteria for how students are doing as for each benchmark along the way. And the process, like a SIT team, they're sitting down looking at student achievement and growth, and they're having conversations about the data and student achievement. This, to me, is the most important work that districts can do when it comes to curriculum and assessment, is identifying these benchmarks and points where you're having these assessments across the year.
One of the values of our new, there was a question about our new math program and the assessments. The assessments that are embedded into this math program, different than what we have in Math and Focus at the elementary level, are tied to the standards. So for the teachers, whether they're administering the assessments on a computer or whether they printed the papers out and the students are doing them on the paper, they can do an analysis to mastery of the standards in that particular unit. Whereas with our former program, this was a very laborious task that was done by our math specialists. When they took a unit assessment, they had to look at the content of each question and then tie it back to the standards as they are written to determine that connection, that alignment. So this is all baked in, so to speak, to our math program. And so our resources provide us that ability to do that type of analysis, which ultimately informs instruction, right? So you can see mastery. So also to Randy's question early regarding, is it this year's information? How do we know how far back they are, right? So if we're giving assessments that are based on second grade content mastery and a student is struggling, we have the ability within the math program to take a look at where they are forwards and backwards. This is year one. So the way that we're using it right now is really exactly as the program was written, but potentially there is an opportunity for us to really look at those assessments to determine where we are along that mastery continuum across grades.
And is that a state standard sort of that?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the cycle of those changing? Not to be cynical, but like.
The Common Core standards were adopted by the state of Connecticut in 2010. There are some who are quite opposed to the Common Core standards. I don't believe that they are going to change in the immediate future.
Okay.
But the Connecticut, you might hear mention of in the state of Connecticut, our State Department of Education calls them the Connecticut Core Standards. They are essentially the Common Core standards. It's just for the Connecticut brand.
Connecticut does like to do that.
Yes, they do.
But a standard is simply that by the end of grade 2, students will be able to multiply with 2-digit by 1-digit number, or they'll know X number of cycles. So that's how those standards are defined. So the Smarter Balance test results, we looked at from 2016 to 2021. And I actually have a handout for you for this part of the presentation. They're right here. Pass that along, just so you can see the numbers more clearly. So what's the test measure? In English language arts, the assessment measures, there are 2 major domains. One domain is English language arts, the other domain is mathematics. And there are claims. The claims are reading. For English language arts, we are looking at reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And for mathematics, the claims are concepts and procedures, problem solving, communication, reasoning, and modeling, data, and assessment. The assessment information or how scores are reported to you. When you hear us talking about a percentage, for example, we'll say that 80% of grade 3 students met the benchmark. What we're really saying there is that students met the achievement standard, or they exceeded the achievement standard. So students in the level 3 and level 4, that's how we're reporting the criteria to you. Okay, so this is what we did. We looked at Easton and Reading and the DERG average. The DERG made up of towns, Darien, Buchanan, Richfield, Weston, Westport, and Wilton. When the state sent us a data set, they very clearly said, do not compare districts. There's too much variability. Different districts had different learning programs last year. Some had more hybrid instruction, some had more or less in-person instruction. So I didn't want to disaggregate the DERG, but I did want to provide a DERG average. So this particular slide is English language arts from 2015 to 2021 in grades 3 to 8. And it starts with 2015, 2016. The Easton School District is in the crimson color. And you can see there that Easton in 2015, 2016, 83% of students were at or above goal. And then the following year was 84%. The following year was 85%. In 2018, 2019, you were at 80%. And as a result of the pandemic in 2020, 2021, the district dropped from 80% to 68.4%. So that is a decline of 12% in English language arts. The DERG declined from 83 to 78.
So is it, do you have this, I'm assuming the answer would be yes, like by grade level, so you can see, like, was there a steeper decline, for example, in grade 3 than there is in grade 8? Oh, yeah. Sorry, I couldn't.
Absolutely, that's a
I
great
can't-
question.
okay.
Right, so you can see that on average, grades 3 through 8, just to reiterate, we dropped from 80% to 68.4% in the town of Easton. The DERG dropped from 83 to 78.9. So Easton declined by 12%, the DERG on average declined by approximately 5%.
And this is, I just want, so this assessment is more of a typically a reading comprehension based assessment versus a.
This assessment, so
It's adaptive, so it should.
this assessment, going back to the claims,
Yeah.
measures reading, writing, speaking, listening, research, and inquiry.
But the way that it measures, as an example, the writing is by their ability to read writing, not by having them write. It's probably-
Think about the process.
Right.
Yeah, whereas the legacy assessment, the students actually wrote to a prompt and then they were hand scored.
So in reading, it says students can read closely and analytically to comprehend a range of increasingly complex literary and informational texts. In the area of writing, students can produce effective and well-grounded writing for a range of purposes and audiences. Claim 4, students can engage in research and inquiry to investigate topics and to analyze, integrate, and present information. So that is these are the claims that the ELA tests measure. So you can see Easton was on a, if you look at the trend line, was on a pretty good pathway. And now you can see where they compare to Easton and the Durgay average.
But we also had a, I mean, if you look at 17, 18, 18, 19, you see, I mean, it's not as significant, but there's a drop of almost, what, 4 points. I mean, that's an interesting drop after 3 years of.
It is.
Stephanie, I wasn't, going back in my own memory, I think 17 and 18, we were third in the state behind Darien and McKinney. I believe. That's
Yeah,
right.
it might have been that year. So we have had some years where in single grades, we've been grade 6 English language arts as an example. We had a number of years where we were not only top in our DERG, but very close to the top in the entire state. That there's great variability, which makes the average comparison interesting to look at in terms of our DERG, but also it requires us then to dig in not only, which is what we're about to do, to the grade by grade and then also cohort. Because we need to have a better understanding of our students and their strengths and needs before we say, oh my gosh, there's a huge dip.
Right.
It might be compared to what other students did in the year before, but perhaps not as much compared to the cohort.
Well, we also have a small cohort of kids. So if you have 5 or 6 kids who made a pretty significant drop in a grade level, that could.
And that's true as well. So the state has provided many qualifiers in our interpretation of this year's data. Because of that, because of the students who might have been affected adversely by learning conditions during the pandemic, because of the students who might have taken the test at home versus taking it at school. We didn't have many students, honestly, who took the test from home. We had some, but not many.
But actually, interestingly enough, like big assessments like Renaissance Star Math and iReady, the kids that took it from home did better because the parents helped their kids. I mean, it was a huge problem in the tests in the assessment world where it's like, oh my gosh, these kids are going up, but they like this doesn't make sense when you look at the other norms. So
That's what happened here, the parents helped them.
no. She's saying a lot of kids didn't test. I'm just saying it's
I'm kidding.
interesting.
And so the state interpretations, I didn't even get into it with our data because it depends on the subject and it depends on the grade. So across the state, there were in some grades and for some subjects, the students who took it at home did much better. And then in other grades, the students who took it at home did much worse. So it's really hard for us to draw too many inferences from that information rather than saying this is broad strokes summative and then we have formative information that again will either confirm or raise.
What we will do, I'm just going to go backwards a little bit to this slide. And this slide is important because what I'm presenting to you tonight is that there are a range of students in level 3 and level 4 and in level 2, right? How many students are in level 2 that are right at the cusp? What are their individual growth targets? And what interventions do we need to provide to get them from level 2 to level 3? And this is where the most variability is right here. And so when the administrators talk about, we're sitting down and we're noticing more students than ever before in our SIT meetings. You heard that from Kim and Steve at the beginning of the year. Well, that means that we have more students than ever before at level 2. And one of the things that you do when you look at these levels, if you look at a student's individual growth, students that are here need to grow more to get to level 3 than students who are here. So we're not, the information we're providing to you tonight, we're not disaggregating it to level, and we're not really talking about a student's growth. These are the kinds of conversations we have internally. And we're not disaggregating according to students with special ed, free reduced lunch, and so on. English language learners, we will do that internally. And if you, obviously, if you want that information, we can provide it to you. But that's kind of, we're just, this is a lot to digest, and this is where we're starting. So that is that information. And the next slide is getting into, and again, you have this in front of you if you need to look at it. The 2 standout grades here for English language arts are grades 4 and 7. Grade 4 declined by 10.5%. However, the DERG average declined by 14.9%. In grade 7, Easton declined from 91.3, which is a very high score, to 77.5. This isn't cohort data, this is just looking at kind of year to year. And the DERG decline.
Can I just give that a little bit of a turn to cut the glare
Yeah.
on it, or like angle it down?
I think the glare is going to continue to be there
It's
because
just
of
gonna
the
spread.
because the light, and it doesn't, the angle doesn't change on that guy.
That's all.
That's a little bit, yeah.
Can you see it on the paper? Can you see it on the
No,
handout?
it's too small to read on the
We
handout.
actually,
No one in the audience.
no one in the audience, I can move this a lot closer.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, so just give me 1 minute.
Sorry, John.
No, this.
The main agenda.
So, can we have that agenda?
I think you just added 30
To
seconds.
fund the installation of good media stuff here.
Look at that.
Better.
Thank you.
It's a mirror.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you see
So-
that still?
I can see it on the.
Oh,
cover.
okay.
What stands out here is, again, grades 4 and 7, where there's declines. And you can see there again what Easton declined in grade 4 by 10%. The DERG average though declined by 14.9 in that year. So
Where do you see that?
So I'm
Yellow.
saying here that in grade 4,
In yellow.
that's a pretty big decline.
Yes.
Highlighted in
82 to
yellow.
72. Yep. 10.5.
Sorry, just give me 1 second. So bigger.
Jen,
So
do you wanna-
what stands out to me is this decline here.
Yep.
By 10%.
Yep.
You can look across here and say, well, the DERG declined as well from 84 to 77. Grade 7, we declined from 91 to 75, decline of 13.
Yeah, I just heard a 14% earlier. I don't think the dirt.
And here the DERG declined from 84.2 to 73, and that's a decline of 10.
Yeah, okay.
You said the DERG declined 14%
Oh, I'm
as a
sorry.
comparison, so I think that's where we were.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw the 6-7. I didn't see the 14. But
But so one of the things that you can look at here, because I know that there's sometimes a tendency to compare the performance between Easton and Reading, and sometimes that's a very helpful comparison because we know that we share the same curriculum, but there are a number of differences between the 2 districts. There's some variability here. So the math story is much more concerning. But in the English language arts story here, you can see that in some places Easton had more of a decline, and in some places they had less of a decline than Reading. So just making that point that there are many variables that impact performance.
This is the cohort data.
Sure. So as we look at the cohort data for English language arts here, this provides some level of reassurance, I think, in the area of English language arts. We're not seeing anything that's dramatically different, which doesn't mean that we're not paying a lot of attention to the students and their reading and writing skills and being sure that those developing well, especially in our early grades and the students who might not have had a typical preschool experience and also had a very atypical last couple of years in terms of the way that they were learning and the role of the parents in that process.
Steph, help me out with the 7th grade, it's 91%, and there's nothing in
They didn't
1920.
take the test.
No testing.
And
Yeah.
but then the 77.3, that's not 8th grade because there was no 8th grade.
That was
No,
the grade
that's
5
two
and
sep-
2 years.
That's the
Right.
16, 17.
They,
So it goes like this.
Follow the
Sorry.
colors,
So
follow the
this is
colors.
grade.
Yellow is the
Grade
cohort.
3 tested here, they didn't test in this year's grade 4 kids because of the pandemic, and that's where grade.
Okay,
Yes,
yep,
yeah.
yep.
It
The-
follows like by
The
colors.
color equals the cohort, correct?
Right,
Yes,
right,
the
so.
colors.
Right.
so the 80.2%, those students are currently freshmen at Georgia. So they're missing years, they're
okay.
missing assessment year, but if you sort of followed the diagonal here, for this cohort set, there are no sort of red flags of concern.
This is actually better than I thought it was gonna
72.
be.
Say again.
I'm just looking at grade 4,
Right, so
27.
83, 78. So it's a, decline of approximately, just a little bit less than 5.
Well, no, I'm looking at grade 4, 17, 18 goes from 84 to 72
That was a pre-pandemic. Yeah.
pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like they, I mean,
then they
obviously,
rebound
and
a
then
little.
they recover a little, but
Right.
not.
But then they gain during the pandemic, which is.
But again, that could be like.
But
three
still
kids,
not-
though.
Not going back, but you have,
Right.
I
Well,
mean,
you gotta
Yeah.
figure 100 kids.
so it's
per
a
class.
long.
Right, so but if you have an
Yes,
N,
yes.
about 80, 100 kids a test, right, and
Right.
I'm not saying that's true, but it just
Hmm.
potentially.
It strikes me especially because of concerns. I don't know, it seems like there's sort of an anecdotal story behind this as well, because it's kind
It
of
must be.
illustrating concern about academic rigor at the middle school and that sort of drop off in expectations and work outside of class and
Yeah,
academic
it's
time.
interesting.
That anecdotally folks are
17,
expressing
18,
concern
19
about,
is
the shift from 5th to 6th
Okay.
grade and then sort of a trailing off
In
in the
the
middle school.
That's-
it's real
And kids
tricky.
not
That's
necessarily
my
being
kids
prepared
cohort,
for
by
high
the
school.
way. That's my kids cohorts. I know that grade. That's interesting. That's really interesting.
So I'm looking at they're
Yep.
right in the middle of their
Right.
academic career in middle school right
Right.
now, and we have, a year and a half or so to see them through and make sure they're ready to go to
Wow.
Marlowe.
But it would be really interesting to see that, I mean, to your point earlier, just the distribution of kids
Hmm.
in level 3 to 4.
Their
level
scale
2.
score information, right?
Yeah.
So where are they along that continuum of level 2? I mean, so the point you're making,
Yes.
if you're really at the cusp of meeting goal, but just under it, that's a very different story of support and intervention than it is for the student who has a very long way to travel.
Well, and is there a growth problem? So Jason mentioned this earlier, is that kids are like somewhat level 3 achieving, but their growth is stalling over time. So then they kind of they stay level 3, but they start falling further and further
Right,
down.
they're sliding down the hill. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
When was this last test issued?
2021.
4 months ago.
Yeah, the end of last school year.
So May?
So May.
Yeah.
Or I don't know,
April, May.
I would say probably.
April,
The
May,
end
the
of April, May.
window that the test provides is quite long.
And Devin's brought this up a couple times. The level participation was,
Oh, high, very high.
okay, same, not materially
We
different than
have
yours.
to have at least 95% participation. That's what the state expects. So we are well above 95%.
Okay, so you keep chasing kids until they take it, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there are some parents every year that, for lots of different reasons, just do not agree with having their child participate in the test, but that's a very, very small number.
And Steph, what's the special services group? The kids that are getting special services, are they,
They are included in this.
they're, okay.
Yep. There are very few students who have IEPs that do not take the standard assessment. But the vast majority of students who participate in special education are included in the district.
So do you remember, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jen. I'll go next.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I just, I don't remember what I was gonna say. An observation is that this is very much appreciated and it's important for us to look at. I am much more interested in our homegrown in-house assessments and the things that teachers observe and see. And again, like we have a limited sample size, but I can just say from a parent's perspective, I feel like we don't get a lot of that information, like the testing that's done in the fall, the testing that's done in January. We don't know when it's coming. We don't know what testing is being done. We don't see results. And then even as a board, this is the only real report out that we get about that information.
So next month, we will get more information about the full formative assessments, because we're back to the traditional master assessment plan that includes all of those measures. And 2 years ago, when we were beginning to look back, we were beginning to look at pulling out some of those assessments because a concern for teachers is always you're taking teaching time to test. In this year, we are putting some of those assessments back in because we want to have the larger benchmark assessments in place to measure progress over time. But you will hear more from our principals in particular about the district administered, and some of them are standardized as well as being homegrown, but some of the formative and benchmark measures that we're using to really gauge progress. And there are a number of conversations that are occurring at the building level where they're saying this, the performance doesn't make any sense to me. The student is really doing okay and holding their own. And those are conversations that happen with teaching teams and with parents. And we move on. And as we know, and I'm not, that the data is the data. But we know that we're small n. We know that every single student counts for roughly 1% of the kids at goal. And for a much larger district, you can have much more variability in terms of their performance. And for us, every single student showing up and being fully engaged makes a big difference.
As this is, again, smart around assessments, this is kind of what you're seeing. These are the assessments that have the most impact on student learning, right? And as a board, you want to know, do we have benchmark assessments? Do we have these diagnostic dipsticks in our curriculum? Now, as a board, you don't necessarily, or you shouldn't really say, well, what's the assessment data for this assessment? What's the assessment? That is too granular. But in your curriculum subcommittee meetings and at the board level, this is what, I'm just advising you. Do we have a system that is systematic, collecting formative data? And do teachers know how to use formative assessment? And do we have these benchmarks throughout the year? That's your number one question. Maybe give us the 30,000-foot view of these benchmarks, perhaps, right? Of, as a school district, do we have those? I don't know, so I'm new here. And you have a new math program, right? And so some of these benchmarks are built in.
But I think what I'm trying to share, that is very helpful guidance, because I think we're always struggling with sort of what do we need as a board? What's our role? Kind of like that getting back to governance kind of thing. I'm just sharing as a parent feedback to you that I think that parents are pretty significantly uninformed throughout the year, but we don't.
About when you're getting, so at the middle school level, I know that I've seen the listservs going home to inform parents of upcoming assessments, and because I have to review them, the letters that go home to the parents when we're going to send the results home. At the elementary level, where, for instance, the beginning of their year reading assessment takes so many weeks, it's a conversation that we can have with the school administration to let parents know we're beginning our multi-week period of doing the assessments, because the assessments are administered one-on-one, right? So it's a teacher really sitting one-on-one with the child to read, to understand their current reading level and to ask them questions. And it also relies on us having subs, right? So we have to be able to sub the teachers out in order to do that. And so we know last year, we were only able to assess half of the elementary school population because of the difficulty with subs and kids not being in school. In this year, what we, to your point, Jenny, it's a matter of communicating, we're beginning our full assessment window. This will take several weeks. This could include, so that parents will have some idea of what's coming up. Because we have gone back to our typical master assessment plan. We have reinstated all of those assessments. It's just that it's so different than the middle school where we say on September 13th, all students will be taking this assessment. It's a little.
Can I just say, the point I want to make is that as a board, we have this system in place?
Right.
Okay, as a parent, you should know how your child is doing in every single one of these.
But
So
we
that is-
don't, that's the point I'm
Okay,
trying to
I'm
make,
just
is
giving
that
you
we
an example.
don't get that feedback.
At the end of last week, I knew that my daughter had an algebra test. She's in 8th grade. She was studying for the test. At the end of the week, I got a notification in Power School. She got a 25 out of 30. Okay, I knew the test was coming. There's a direct relationship between me helping her study, her taking the test, and then me getting a score. I think either today or Friday, I received a test grade in Power School of my junior in high school getting a grade in an AP Calc assessment. Okay? So this is it. So these are important to parents. That's why I love that comment before about who said it, that Sarah and
Annie are doing.
Sarah and Annie are doing a presentation on Power School tips. And that is something we need to be doing a lot of. And that, because that links all of this together.
So the Power School parent information speaks well to the middle school group. At the elementary school, the parents don't.
Right.
So we don't use the teacher.
But one of the things that we do get
Yeah.
in elementary school that I think it would be helpful if, like when you go back to your beautiful formative assessment timeline, we get our progress reports that have broken down the different kind of domains that students are working on in math and the domains they're working on in reading and writing. And you get 1, 2, 3, 4 scores.
Right.
It would be really helpful if when they're doing some sort of formative assessment or benchmarking to know, okay, we're working on kind of this area, just very similar to what you have here, right? Where they're working on number systems and operations. This, first quiz, this formative assessment quiz is on this piece, right? And over time, you're building and checking for understanding on a set of skills that you're teaching that align to the standard that's eventually going to be tested on the larger benchmark.
Yes.
Right. So what's kind of, in my opinion, missing often is some of these, I think they're happening. It's really hard to teach if you don't know, how kids are doing, but the feedback loop to a parent around, hey, your student is doing really well on adding 2-digit numbers, or hey, your student's really struggling on adding 2-digit numbers. I think it's a place value challenge, right? You should be doing these kind of things at home.
Right.
We don't really get.
Yep.
And so I think at the board level, right, I completely agree. If we look at benchmarks, right, it's going to really help us understand, or you understand from a curriculum standpoint, oh gosh, numbers and operations, not great for us, which really matters because then you can't do expressions and ratios and you're going to, right? But just from the communication piece of the parent level, I think some of the concerns you hear tonight about rigor or we don't focus on instruction is just, it's a feedback loop problem. The teachers are doing it, they're killing it. They're working super duper hard, but the student work we get home isn't necessarily tied to a skill, is tied to a standard that helps us understand progression over time. But then we get this really cool progress report. I think it's really awesome, but that shows you how you did in these, it's more like a benchmark. Here's how you're doing in phase 1, phase 2, whatever. So it'd just be helpful if it was more connected to the work. And so you knew, okay, yeah, I need to work on this, my kids are working on, we have a list of sight words, that's lovely. I know I can sit down with Robert, we can do sight reads, things like that just really help inform. Then I know, are they growing?
Right.
Yeah,
So
I
anyway.
understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's something, that's helpful.
And I know that's not necessarily a board, we don't have to know hey, how many formative assessments did you do in the first unit? But it would be helpful, I think, from a standpoint of knowing those things are happening, the systems in place, which is lovely. But then families can have more thoughtful communication also with the teacher around gaps or strengths so that we're able to better support at home. And I know those things are in place. I think the communication, putting the scope and sequences up, super helpful.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll stop talking now. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we were about here.
There we go. Yeah.
Moving on to math. So, essentially here, you can see in 2015, 2016, Easton was at 74%. The following year, you grew to 75%. The following year, you grew to 79.9%. In 2018, 2019, you stayed pretty flat at 77.8. And then following the pandemic, you went from 74% to 69.
77 to 69.
We're the
We're the brick red.
We're the red.
So
We're the
you went,
red.
yeah,
Oh, we're the red.
74 to 69, 68.9.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the decline there. I mean, Easton and Rennie, pretty similar. The Durgay average is at 72.
But I'm sorry, the decline though for Durgay?
10 points.
The decline from Durgay is from 82 to 72, so a significant decline.
So greater decline,
The greater decline.
yeah,
They fell further.
but not
We were
that much
lower.
for Reading, yeah, right, we
were
started
lower
lower
at the
and,
beginning, we fell less, but
Yeah.
you can see where, that's where we are there, so we're pretty commensurate.
Yeah.
And then I think for this slide, I'm just gonna come over to the board.
Oh, great.
You can see that there are some concerns here.
Holy moly.
Grade 4 went from 82 to 70, decline of 12. This is not cohort data, this is just a grade level data.
Mhm.
Grade 6, 79 to 67. And this is a big jump, a big decline, 77 to 57, which is a 20-point. There are significant.
eighth grade students.
There are some big declines that match. So grade 4 declined by 12, the Dirk declined by 11. Grade 6 declined by 11. The Dirk also declined by 11. But this one is pretty significant. 77 down to 20. 77 to 57 declined by 20. The Dirk declined by 13.5.
So in some cases, by grade level, very similar to the DERG in terms of the dip. And interestingly, in grade 8, the students improved the grade to grade in performance. But obviously, the
They were
20-point dip.
they were a lot lower to start with.
Sure.
Can you help me understand these numbers? How are we showing a drop in grade 3 if they don't test until grade 3? And then I guess.
because it's not cohort left to right. The only way to see cohort on this is to go from grade 3, 2018, 2019. No, the last one.
Okay.
The last
so
one
the
did have a
students who
dimension
were
of
in
cohort.
grade,
It did.
the students who
Yeah.
were in grade 3 that year,
So-
the students who were, okay.
So that box in the upper left, the intersection of grade 3 in 2018, 2019, that cohort is 60, went from 78.4 to 60.9.
Just easier to see in the next slide.
No, that's okay. I understand now.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yikes,
Yeah, this
because
is
the
gonna be
cohort
grade
story
3.
here is even
No, the
worse.
cohort story is absolutely more concerning.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll get to that one next. And so you can see here, very different than the English language arts story, here, where there was, sort of no big red flag, we see
And
very
if you just-
significant drops.
And if you just look at this column.
Yeah.
And start at the top and just go.
Yep.
Here.
Ooh.
Yep.
Right, so there's a great deal of attention being placed on math, not only here in Easton, but across the state and across the country. Math is the content area across the country that where we've seen the greatest dip in progress. Last year, it appeared that some of the struggles were more computational, which frankly is the best of the bad news we can have. If we said that the students are really struggling with conceptual understanding, that's a much more difficult thing to remediate. Students are struggling with calculation. We make sure that their method is accurate and we give them more practice time to calculate, and that's a pretty easy thing to reinforce at home. The student really needs to build conceptual understanding and develop that in a way that's developmentally appropriate, beginning with the concrete and eventually moving to the abstract. That requires skilled teachers.
right? And our math interventionists are being trained, these are para educators. But that part of math understanding, harder to remediate. So that's the story that we're still trying to unfold this year. Again, as we're confirming with our internal measures and getting these kids into intervention. What can we get up to speed pretty quickly? And what's gonna require a longer plan? Because again, you have to think from the student's point of view, if you're struggling in a subject area and possibly struggling in 2 major subject areas, you want the students to still feel engaged at school. You cannot book their schedule with the core instruction and then intervention all day long and not give them anything to look forward to or feel good about, right? So we have to look really carefully at what the individual plan is for these students within general education so that they're getting support in a way that helps them to feel successful, gives them also some control over it too. How can kids create their own learning goals with the support of teachers, get parents involved so that they can begin to make gains and make up some of the time that's been lost.
Stephanie, I feel like this is probably about the most appropriate time for me to express concerns about the current math program. Because I hear you talking about this and I absolutely believe that that's what you and the administration and the teachers are working on. But I have only one child's data point, of information to go on. I'm talking about a 4th grader, looking at all the work coming home and looking at the most recent assessment. And I'm significantly concerned and disappointed in what I'm seeing so far. It looks like it looks like a standardized test. The way it's laid out, the question format, it's largely multiple choice. The concepts are shrouded in all of this complicated, like unnecessarily complicated verbiage.
So we should sit down and talk about it more because the unit assessments are absolutely right. The setup is very much like a multiple choice standardized test, and it's so that they can do that disaggregation down to the standard and provide it from the data. The day-to-day instruction is not like taking a standardized test. We've been in classrooms, we've seen kids engaged in pictures and videos and hands-on work in classrooms. The PD last week gave the teachers a lot more information about enrichment and differentiation, but it's a brand new program. So the
I know, I'm
teachers are
just giving
finding
you
their way through.
initial
When I walked
feedback.
through 2 classrooms, I actually saw the same lesson repeated in 2 classrooms, and I walked away and I said, well, that's one that they probably won't do again next time around. Just because when you're doing something for the first time, even if the teacher previews a lesson, you have to sort of see how it floats with the kids. So I'm not defending it. I do want to hear more information about your individual experience at home. But we will see that in the first year implementation of the new program. But there are parts of it that we love and the parts of it we don't love. And I have heard from the teachers with the first assessments that in 1 grade level, for instance, they looked at the assessment and they said, because of what students' experience was last year, we're not going to give this assessment as designed because I don't think it's the right thing for the kids in terms of their emotional needs right now, and I can gather this information in other ways. And so we created a plan B. In the other school, in Reading, they decided to administer the assessment exactly as designed, and the feedback was that it went perfectly well. But there are going to be those growing pains with the new assessment.
I'll give you an example. I remember I was a principal in Richfield for 10 years at the elementary level, and we started a new program. We expected to see a lot of growth, and we didn't see growth because there wasn't any coordination curriculum about the benchmarks, the assessments, and there wasn't a consistent scope and sequence. I saw the same problem when I went to New Fairfield, when they had a program that had been in place for a couple of years that's supposed to improve student achievement, but student achievement was mixed. And the problem is you walk into a classroom and you walk down a hallway, there were 6 teachers at each level, so 6 3rd grade teachers. I was seeing something different in every 3rd grade classroom. And this is why getting back to this slide is so important, right? I'm just going back to it again. is that you go into one classroom and the teacher would be here. You go into another classroom and the teacher would be here. There are different points along the continuum. And so when you have a new program, okay, a high quality program isn't going to improve student achievement by itself. You do need a very robust curriculum plan and this type of approach, because if teachers are in different places, they're teaching at different points and they're not talking to each other about student data. And there's no coordination of interventions. So I should be able to walk into any one of our classrooms in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade and say they're exactly here, and that there's an assessment and they're having conversations about student performance and growth, and they're identifying students that need more help, and then we're streamlining all of our support. Right.
Well, our schedule allows for team meetings every day.
But if they're in different places, so like,
Right.
if I'm teaching addition and you're teaching division and we're in the same grade, like it's hard for me to have a conversation with you about the data what I'm seeing here, because
Well,
you're
right.
like.
Those
Well,
team
right,
meetings
but
aren't
if these are the meetings that the teachers are having and they're going, well, I'm over here, well, I'm down here, well, there's something's wrong.
And that's.
Right.
Especially in year one of an implementation of a new program, we really do ask them to live it in a more lockstep manner than we would in years where teachers understand the program and they understand their students, and they can decide, this is a lesson that I know is going to take 2 days and I'm going to allow them, whatever, this is a lesson that's not necessary, but they don't know that yet. So they are marching more in lockstep, which does make the team meetings possible, because they're all sharing. They're all, we implement the same lesson, what we do differently, what's going well, how are the students faring, and those are the conversations that are happening.
Now, is that the math specialist job to kind of orchestrate that?
It is, and the math specialist, so part of what we purchased with the new resource is a tremendous amount of professional development. So our elementary school teachers are essentially engaged in professional development around this new resource on every release day. So remember, it started last spring, when they were introduced to the program, and then they had a half-day session 2 days before school started, and then another one the day before school started, and that's what they were doing also last week. This morning, our math specialists alone were meeting with the intervention team for that component of the program success maker, so that they can do sort of train the trainer type of work around the intervention program. So we are trying to receive much more support from the publisher, so that the implementation goes more smoothly. With Math in Focus, you might remember that we did not do as much training on the resource itself with the company, but we did invest in bringing Dr. Yep Har from Singapore to provide professional development sessions for our teachers. He did a parent session, and he actually did work in the K-12, really in all 5 buildings, and that was enormously successful.
Did you have Singapore math or math?
We had Math in Focus, right? So that was our prior math program. The difficulty with Math in Focus was that while we believed in the philosophy of the program, it was not well aligned to the standards. So the teachers needed to do a lot of work to be sure that what they were reporting, you made a comment about the report card, but what they were reporting on the report card was the grade level standards, as opposed to only the success on a unit assessment, as an example.
When did you last have Math in Focus?
Last year.
Okay. Listen, Math in Focus on paper looks like this is the best approach. This is the best program we should get. We should get it right. And I think they did that in Richfield, and they discarded it 5 years later.
Yeah.
I remember implementing a program associated with. It's called Words Their Way, and it was a program focusing on phonics and word sorts. Yes. On paper, we did all this training. We brought in the program, and we're saying this is the most well-researched program. It should improve phonics and basically reading skills. And it didn't. Why? Because it was too darn complicated for the teachers to implement.
And the parents, the activities.
Right? The teachers couldn't do it. They couldn't fit it in the day. It was so complicated. So it's interesting.
So I'll just say, I'm really happy that you're focusing on tier 1 instruction, providing like that support to teachers. I think I know there's a lot of kids who are gonna be in tier 2 getting small group instruction or one-on-one, I think you said with math. But I think with teachers having to deal with virtual instruction, hybrid instruction, pandemic instruction, mask instruction, trying to get back to the basics of really strong instruction, high leverage practices, like what works. I mean, obviously, I think there's a lot of focus on SEL as there should be, but it doesn't mean you don't teach academics, right? It's a support of teaching strong academics. And I think sometimes there seems to be confusion between, you can still have rigor and support kids' mental health and social emotional needs. And so just making sure that we have a good balance around those things.
Question, when, and it's, next April, May is not the right answer. When would we see evidence of what we're doing today? And going back to your continuum, your timeline, right? We have assessments, when do you think we'll start to see that we're gaining on it, so to speak?
You're gonna have some information next month about the fall assessments and what we're seeing in terms of the need and how that compares to what you're seeing tonight. So there's gonna be a little bit more information next month. And then the combination of what we share tonight and then the internal measures inform the school goals and all of the teachers' student learning objective, all of their action plans to support students. And then at the mid-year point is when we typically do the next big formal benchmark checking. So we wouldn't typically report out to the board at a unit assessment level. It's pretty granular.
Yep.
But we have 3 main points in the year. So we don't assess every single student, for instance, at the middle school level with the NWA MAP test. At the middle of the year, we assess the students who receive intervention. And the reason for that is that that assessment can take a very long time. And for students who are doing well, and we have a lot of informal assessments that tell us that the students are doing well, there's no reason to take 2 days of instructional time away from them. But we do it for students who are receiving intervention.
Like, forget about us for a moment, but when you or the buildings will really start to see like, okay, we're heading the right direction and we're gaining back on it what we lost the last 12, 18 months. When do you?
Yeah, so we would see, so in terms of, if we're talking about the whole school population, we'd be looking at universal assessments. So again, that's probably at the mid-year point. So we've just completed fall assessments, so at mid-year. If we're talking about students who are receiving intervention because they're struggling in one way or another, we would see a measurement at the next big data cycle end, so 6 to 8 weeks.
So your question, I just want to make sure I understand, is at what point would you see the impact of this additional support, maybe in an intervention, or this additional like work in the tier 1 space? Like, when would you start to see accelerated growth or some potential close in a student's learning loss? Like, so when would you start to see kids overcoming, I hate the word learning loss, but overcome that learning loss?
Touching on what Kim talked about tonight and what she's seen. And listen, the bright kids, they get it. They're getting help at home. They're getting it from a lot of different directions. It's unfortunate we can't do more for them, but maybe we can now with this new math to a certain extent. But that's always been the case. It's the kids that are tier 3 down, tier 2 on your chart, not intervention, but on your levels there, that just fell into tier 2. And so their scores have dropped and they just missed because of the way school was delivered the last 15, 18 months. That's my point. It's
So is there an amount of time that you would, that you could close the gap?
And there's not a right or wrong answer. I'm just curious what
Yeah.
you think as the professionals. You guys are here and what you really think. And you're like, okay, we're starting.
There's a little bit of a wrong answer. If it's 18 months from now, like, we need a better measure, right? We need a way to say, is sort of what we're funding and supporting as a board making a difference to our priorities? And so some kind of regularity, and if it's 6 to 8 weeks for the students who have the most need, and quarterly or biannually, that like we just need to have a sense of
So that's
what are the
exactly
measurement
I'm saying.
periods.
So if we're talking about the kids receiving intervention, we would know at the end of the first data cycle, they've just completed the initial data cycle right now to identify any new students who need intervention. The kids who received intervention last year, it's assumed when they begin the year that they're going to continue to need. So we don't lose any time with those students. They're scooped up right away. But then we have the first SIT meetings at about this time, really, beginning of October, because the assessments are completed in the month of September. And then we determine any new students who need intervention, and then that data cycle begins. So it's about 6 to 8 weeks when they would come back together and say, where are we? Do we need to change the number of time that students receive intervention a week? Does it need to be more? Does it need to be less? Do we need to change the method of intervention, et cetera? So
Steph, do you
that's
need the extra 2 weeks to assess? Because each cycle is 6 weeks. So, I mean, this is a question. Does it take 2 weeks after that 6-week cycle to be able to assess where the child is, and do they still need this, or do they need to go down? Do they, can they go back to tier 1?
I'm saying 6 to 8 weeks because I think there's some variability. I don't want to say 6 weeks from today on October 12th. Or
Oh, yeah, okay, that's fine.
6 to 8 weeks would be a reasonable
Okay.
frame
Yep.
in order for the principals to be able to share, this is what we're seeing. So for instance, last year, we saw many more students who needed tier 2 support. But frankly, if we were providing full out support for the number of students who needed it, one, we didn't have the staffing to do it, but two, then it would create an imbalance, right? Then you would have fewer students in the classroom with the teacher and more students receiving support potentially than would be typical. So it meant that the teachers were providing a different type of tier 1 support, more intervention in the classroom. But last year, because of all of the different mitigation strategies that were in place, small group instruction was really tough. It did happen, but it wasn't easy, right? Because the teachers couldn't sit right next to the students. Some of the students were at home, they were zooming in, right? So getting back to sort of more typical schooling this year is going to make such a critical difference. And when you ask the question sort of like, well, how long does it take? The other part of this is that for our little ones, what we're also hearing is that they're learning how to be at school.
Yeah.
And it's not so typical for second graders to need to learn how to, this is how you raise your hand. This is how you get in line. You have to wait until someone's done before you start talking. So those are the things that we associate typically with kindergarten, but some of our children really haven't been in school, or if they've been in school, it's for a really unusual type of, they were in, they were out. We had lots of parents last year, frankly, that were for different reasons, saying my child can come to school, but now I don't feel comfortable, I'm gonna keep them at home. And we had some students that missed preschool experiences. So those things we might say, oh my gosh, there's just a change right away. And they're engaged and we're seeing dramatic.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I don't know the answer to that question yet. It's not quite the middle of October. And we may know pretty soon whether we have more or less students receiving intervention.
Right.
But that doesn't mean I know or we know how well students in tier 1 are doing generally. And I can tell you right now, one of the things we have to work out is that we're at 68.9. Where's our goal for next year?
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Right.
Should it be 68? Should it be 75?
Right.
Should our goal be from 68 to where we left off at 74? Is a 6-point growth in a year feasible?
Right.
So let me just move on a second.
And I know we don't have Smarter Balance, every month, but the degree to which we can check along the way that we see some kind of.
We'll do that.
We have block assessments. So the state offers the opportunity for districts to administer what they call interim assessments, which are block assessments, which are modeled after the full test. And we use those block assessments. We use them sometimes for instruction, so that students become familiar with the assessment format, typically, just prior to taking the assessment, but they also, based on the student need that the teachers are seeing, they select a particular block assessment and use it as a formative measure. So that they'll give the assessment and then provide intervention based on that interim assessment as well. And that's obviously calibrated to our standards because it's modeled after the Smarter Balance.
Can I just jump in and say that I'm not, I may be a complete outlier here, but smarter balance scores are like the bottom of my list as far as concerns for students. and growth. I mean, it is one mark, standardized mark. I mean, I wouldn't want to see us set any goal. I would much rather see us be setting specific classroom level, grade level, building level goals that our teachers set for our kids and monitor and communicate to parents.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
how I understand that
Yeah,
this
but you
is
gotta
an
have
important
something.
outward measure for
Yeah.
folks, but
Well, they'll triangulate, right? So
Yeah.
they'll use Smarter Balanced as a measure. And we would never, especially last year, use this as the only measure to set a goal.
In reality, we need to do both.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they'll be using the internal measures and then also things that are standardized but are not required by the state, such as NWEA and the PSAT that are.
So let me move on to the next step, right? So in general, our ELA scores, right, let me move forward here. Okay. Our ELA scores dropped, grades 3 through an 8 dropped on average 5%. Okay. Our math scores dropped about 10%. But within each grade level, there are pockets where in ELA we dropped anywhere from 10 to 13%, depending on the grade, and in math we dropped from 12 to 20%, depending on the grade. Right?
You're talking about a cohort.
I'm talking about specific, yes. in the cohort.
Or like third grade to third grade, or third grade to move to fourth grade.
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending on the grade. So on average, our average dropped 5% ELA.
Yeah.
In math, it dropped about 10%.
Yeah.
But there are pockets that there are things we need to delve into, right? So the next steps, and this kind of Jenny gets into you know, what are we actually going to be doing, right? So we have to examine our fall assessment data, NWA, the elementary reading and math assessment, the other formative assessments. We need to analyze our student intervention data, our programs and approaches that we're doing, the SIP team interventions. We need to delve in and help that. We need to provide more targeted instruction to claim and target level. I'm not going to get into that right now. And then we have to really look at what is our high quality instruction, right? So yes, support students' social emotional learning, but really we need to get kids flexing their academic muscles again. And that's called student agency. And that we have to really kind of push into that. This is just an example. A claim is the blue. That's what I've been reporting, but there are specific targets and skills we also need to drill down into as well. So part A tonight, we just talked about the types of assessments, summative, formative. You know, we need to have a good plan, make sure we have formative assessments mapped out, scope and sequence. Part B in November, we kind of need to delve into what are our district and school goals, right? We do need a set of metrics. What are those metrics? And there should be a combination of things. You know, do we set a target for smarter balance in the future? But do we also are we also mindful of really what's most important are the formative assessments and the benchmarks that happen internally? And do we have a really good sense of what they are, right? So you're right.
double thumbs up, amen,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, I think we need a special meeting dedicated to that conversation. Happy to talk about it anytime and talk about it twice, but I think this is so important and we need to make sure that we carve out all of our mental energy and time for that. I think it warrants a meeting, an extra meeting. I know nobody's looking for another meeting, but I think this is so important that we should really dedicate time to that. Maybe, I'm not saying we have to move it up, you know, before November, but
Is it potentially an Easton,
Could
combined
be.
Easton
Yeah. Could be.
Reading
I was looking at
discussion, so that you're not,
tonight on
Yeah.
public comment and administrative comments.
Yeah.
I would almost say on a night that we do that, we don't have administrative reports.
Right.
We go into a discussion.
And that's what I
item,
mean
which is
about a
this.
special meeting. There would be, essentially, it's not time for public comment. It's not, we're not taking any action. So we don't need, input on here's what you do. It is simply, let's dive in on this topic and dedicate the hour, 2 hours, whatever we need to that.
and I certainly hope that this was
Yeah.
the end of marathon public comment sessions on issues that distract us
We'll do our
From the
best to
work at
avoid.
hand.
John,
Yeah, Randy.
well, point, I'm sorry, just 2 seconds. So to John's point, an agenda.
Yeah.
And then who?
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
obviously,
That's right.
but you know, does it, Kim, Steve?
I think you probably want the building leaders because you're gonna want to, I mean, in a perfect world, that going diagonal against the cohort, you see that laid out as a, let's talk about our third graders. Okay, let's talk about our fourth graders. Let's talk about, you know, and really sort of not just say the children, how they did last year, but how has, we're looking at fifth graders, how has this cohort evolved over the course of the last 3 years where we've had assessment data? And for Kim to be able to talk about that is
Well,
extraordinary.
the question becomes, does it need to be a special meeting or is the next meeting, depending on what's already on the agenda for November? And you cut a bunch of things out of that agenda that may or may not.
I would love to. It's just, you take the weed whacker to the agenda and it's really gnarly.
Like I was saying, like this, the administrative comments tonight and tonight's,
yep,
the report from the administrator.
Yep.
You know, I would delete that.
Right.
And that would save time.
The problem is our regular meeting in November, I'm gonna want to spend a lot of time talking to our new director of finance and operations. And so we don't want to reduce that unless we want to do a special meeting for the director of finance and operations to give us.
He's brand new, what do you want to talk to him about?
There'll be a lot. There'll be a lot.
Can we just start earlier?
Is that,
Hope he's
is
not
that
watching.
meeting stuff, or is that like,
I think,
you guys sit down and?
Did you bring beer or just?
I'm sorry.
yeah, well, no, I
I
think
got
we
a
all,
sense
I think we all
of
need to
actually
go.
have
Yeah.
Let's
Can't wait to get to item 2 in discussion of possible action.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So, are we good? Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. I'll stay here for the next item.
Good. Right, and I will, you have the mouse? I already have if you go up to the top of the page, the tab directly next to the tab you're on.
This one?
No, to the right. Yep, there you go.
Okay.
Very good.
In case the public's wondering where we are on the screen, we're all cowering in the corner, getting
right.
snacks and standing up, so our
That's
legs
right.
don't see up.
Can you tell if anybody's watching?
I'm
So
gonna
I'm
just-
pleased to offer just a brief overview of our newly debuted curriculum website. So this is the cover page of this.
By the way,
And I absolutely want to give credit to Sarah Scrofani, whose technical skills honestly made this possible, not just her technical skills, but her terrific positive sense of can-do in every single question that I bring to her, all of our collaborative discussions. Her energy makes what's in my mind possible on our website, because these are ideas that frankly we've had for a long time, and we haven't had anyone on the tech side of things who could say, this is easy, this is really difficult, we can do this. And so with the curriculum work, while part of it is reformatting, the other part is building the site and then constructing it in such a way so that the documents can be dynamic. So the way that it works right now is that they can be updated by curriculum specialists. Once I confirm any minor changes, then they become live on the site, right? So it doesn't happen instantly. It's not like this is a live Google Doc that's instantly being updated, but this is a Google website. And so everything is connected to a document behind it that can't be edited by a member of the public, certainly, but can be edited on the back end without having to take down the whole thing and re-upload documents.
Through like a hyperlink or no, not wrong terminology?
no, so Google, the way that Google Sites is a what you see is what you get website editor. And essentially they're typing in like they're using a Word document.
Okay.
And it's showing up and sort of being published as a doc here, but they can absolutely hyperlink to Google Docs or PDFs or PowerPoints or whatever they want. Yeah.
So we're really trying to get away from the use of PDFs in general on our website because of ADA accessibility. We want people who need to have a translation of the documents, have the ability to do that. And that's very difficult to do with PDFs or when things are loaded as images, then they can't be translated. So we tried to create this in such a way so that for a parent, they could view a whole grade level at a time as opposed to a subject area. So you can see right now, you can click on
the image and they can pull up each one of the subject areas. In speaking with parents and with staff, it seemed that what people most wanted to know was more of the basic, what is the topic, what's the objective, what are the concepts and skills, and any core text or resources. Parents were less interested in the enduring understandings or the essential questions, which are very interesting to educate, because that's the inquiry that engages students. That's really what we want to see. So that exists, but it's not showing up on the page. The professional view of this document includes a number of other things.
If
We
you
will
get-
add links to the standards as well, but again, in our surveying of people a number of years ago, people said, if I want to find the standards, I'll look at them. I really want to, I trust that you're basing your curriculum on the standards. I want to see the topics and plain, easy to understand.
Right. Good.
Was someone ask a question?
No.
This is beautiful.
So you can really just read across the subject area. It's here, science was built out a number of years ago by the science instructional leader in Reading. And Easton benefits from the instructional leader in Reading, who put a lot of work into the science map when we made the transition to the next generation science standards.
I know, right?
So that's where you see the change in the visual. We tried very hard to be consistent just in the visual layout here. And as I said earlier in the evening, we will ultimately be adding social studies, we will add the health curriculum, we will add all curriculums, but it will take some time in the areas where we don't have any.
Stephanie, this is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
This has been a long time coming, and it's like suddenly the train just went busting through the station at 100 miles an hour. This is wonderful.
It's great.
Thank you.
So I'm really looking, thank you. I'm really looking forward to building this out. Right now, it's still fairly static. So I'm excited to add some of the resources. This evening, the Easton and Reading Joint Curriculum Committee was going to meet. There was a communication and posting issue, and the fact is that presentation can be videotaped, and it was a presentation on middle school math resources. And we can post that presentation on this site. So we can certainly send it out as a listserv. We can offer parents an opportunity to come in and ask questions and have a discussion, and we can post the video. And I want to do more of that, especially with the new math resource. Here are some parent videos to explain how to support at home.
Yeah. It would be amazing for the third grade teacher to be taking us through each one of the items in a YouTube video, or for someone in central office, or Kim, or anybody, and for us to be able to see, it'd be amazing if we could get a Barlow calc teacher to say, let me talk to you about the vertical integration of this curriculum, and so where it starts back here and how it flows, so you can get this view and that
So
view.
you get the strands, yeah. So you can't see on here, I think maybe it exists where this video.
Oh,
is
yeah,
here.
you can drag that around.
I can move this.
Yeah, you can just drag it around.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for 9 through 12, it takes the viewer to documents that already exist. So we are working on updating the program of study for Barlow. Right now, this is really a straightforward document. It needs to be updated to be something that's more 2021, have more hyperlinks, be a little more user friendly. Right now, people really need to scroll through the document to find what they're looking for. But the information is here. They can find curriculum guides by discipline. So what we're trying to do is establish through the curriculum website a one-stop place for people who are looking for curriculum information. Then we're going to do the exact same thing for climate. So here's the climate website that has all the policies that are related to climate, has all of the forms that would need to be filled out if someone wants to report bullying. It has information about the Safe School Climate Plan. It has the specific goals by district, the goals by school, resources, right? In addition to, you heard Kim talk about the video that was created at Samuel Staples. We saw that video. It is just so terrific and kid friendly. We want those videos to also go on the website as well, so that parents can go on and they see climate, and they might have, oh, so you're talking about bullying. No, there's a really positive slant on this. How do we recognize acts of kindness? How do we teach children to treat one another with kindness and respect?
Yeah,
So-
catch someone doing something right.
Exactly. So we will continue to build this out. And thank you for staying.
That's great. Well, I mean, way to put something that'll get us, awake at this time of the evening. Really good stuff here. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, my thanks to Sarah and.
Yeah, and love that partnership. Okay, so moving on to C. So give me 1 second here. I'm just gonna get us back over here. I'm gonna go back over there. Thank you. Great job. Thank you. All right. All right, so we are there. Randy?
Thank you. Thank you. Not where I am, yeah.
All right, so 6C, and this actually, this I did just before and added in the D that I was planning. So let me just say D is actually our other item.
Social media discussions.
Right. Okay.
That's what a good secretary.
And we've got this guy. All right, so this should be pretty painless. I'll give a very brief summary. So Jeff, Randy, and I met as the negotiating committee with the Easton Intermediate Administrators Association over the course of several weeks. Vicki Graham joined us and was invaluable in those discussions, met with all of the building the principals and vice principals and sort of other members of the Intermediate Administrators Association, and had a really great set of conversations. These types of conversations don't always have sort of good faith on both sides. And that was just not the case here. We had a wonderful set of discussions, really reasonable. They understood our perspective in terms of safeguarding the needs of taxpayers in town and making sure that we're not being irresponsible with our spending. And we understood their perspective on a number of things that are really important for them to be able to do what they need to do for our students and our schools. The document was shared last Friday, the full document. So I want to give anyone who has any questions about any content within the document an opportunity to ask those questions. Obviously, this document is a public record and will be available for everyone. The association has signed, and I have it here, and I'm ready to sign it once authorized by the board, and I can hand it to Dr. McKinnon tonight to take back and file. Are there any questions about any of the content of it? Also, Randy or Jeff, do you have anything you want to add about our discussion?
They're an honorary crew. No, it was good. It was very productive, very professional. It was great.
Yeah.
So, and Vicki was tremendous.
She really was. Yeah. Anything?
That's exactly what happened. Yeah.
I think I just want to hear from you. It was mentioned earlier tonight, even, and I think Devin mentioned it, and someone else in the audience, concern for just sort of the mental state and the fatigue level and the wherewithal of our administrators. And the last couple of years have just been insane.
Brutal.
Brutal. That's the word for it. So I guess I just want to sort of sense and feeling from you all if you got the impression in these negotiations that our administrators leaving this and signing this document feeling well supported by us. And I know
it's a great question.
Financial compensation is a big part of it.
It is, and we're this is not no one's ever doing a 10% increase when you're thinking you're not seeing a massive increase here. That said, we did a couple of special things, as you see in the contract, to make sure that Kim is properly taken care of as our only building leader amongst the 5 schools in ER9 still here. We had to sort of thread the needle on a couple of these things, and they were really understanding about, look, if let's say we put a couple thousand more into this line for Kim this year, well, then it makes the sort of amount of the increase, if we're also taking Annie from an 11-month to a 12-month, that gets really tricky for us to make that work with the budget. So if instead we put that into the second year, does that work? And they were very understanding about that, but also appreciative of the gesture of like, let's smooth out the budget impact of these things and try to do the best thing we can possibly do for you as administrators. That said, you know, when we think like moving Annie from an 11-month to a 12-month, we're getting some more of her time, but we're also getting a lot, I think, of goodwill from that, because we are recognizing we value you. And they did actually, we asked them to put together a summary of all of the things that have changed over the course of the last 5 years, since the time that Annie started, and started as an 11-month and now, and it was striking. It was a list that was not just like, oh, well, I also gotta show up sometimes a couple minutes early. It was, and we're not talking about stuff that they're making up. These are mandates from the state and the federal government, and new rules for reporting on Title IX investigations and all of those things that she's taking a lead in. So
I easily argue she probably only worked maybe 1 year as an impact.
Yeah, right.
11 months.
So so there's a lot to that. I think the one place, to be perfectly frank, where we should make sure that we're showing some appreciation, Jeff did a really good job of this at the end of the conversations, is some shout outs for Mr. Brownstein.
Yeah.
I really think he is a phenomenal educator. I have nothing but the utmost respect. And this contract doesn't specifically have, I mean, he obviously is getting the increases and those kinds of things, but nothing like really, special for him. And he deserves to be recognized for all that he does. He really is a big part of the heart of that school. So we should keep that in mind. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right, so I would look for a motion. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the agreement with the Easton Intermediate Administrators Association, the 2022 through 25 school years. Thank you, Devin. Thank you, Randy, with your second. Any discussion? Very good. All in favor? Unanimously approved at 10:59 p.m. That's right. All right. Randy, do you want to kick off with it? And I will say, like, our bylaws speak to this, and that'll be a part of the training that we do, but yeah.
And that's great. I just want this to be, an agreement amongst the six of us that we have and I'll call it the courtesy, the professional respect for one another to pick up the phone. You guys gonna do that and not have any beer with it? I'm serious. No, I'm fine.
No, not sharing.
But just listen, there are examples that over the last several years, whether it be Dr. Harrison, whatever, something would be of interest, I would pick up the phone and call, or I would email and I'd say, I'm gonna call you, or when's a good time to call? I just want that, I want us to come back to that. It feels like, I don't want to say we hide behind our computers, but we do. It's a societal thing, and it starts at a younger age, and it's crept into the parents. And I see some of the stuff on Facebook. I was like, you gotta be kidding. I asked for, don't send me anymore because I can't, it just turns my stomach. And I don't think that's this group.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, it's just not. So I don't think there's a place for it. And I personally, I just don't want to see us on those sites, promoting any of that stuff or even participating in it. Just, and it's hard because this is not a job. This is a volunteer thing. And you have a life and you have friends and you have other folks, and I get it. I want the semi-professional courtesy that we all feel comfortable picking up the phone and calling the person if they feel like they've overstepped their bounds or what have you.
And that is the way that we had handled it forever.
Well, I don't know that we can say forever, but I think it's fair to say that the sort of prevalence of
social media usage is much higher than it
Oh,
was
sure. Yeah.
10 years ago,
That's
right?
right, that's
Yeah.
very
And
true.
I think especially, I mean, like, and kids don't even use Facebook anymore because this is grandma and grandpa use now,
That's right.
right? So they're on to the next thing and we'll go ruin that for them too, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Let's go record some TikToks, right?
Yeah.
But so that we can ruin it for them. But so I think we should have a sort of a good enough dynamic amongst the members of the board that we have that ability. I think we all have very different sort of starting points, right? In terms of our point of view on like when we're reacting to something. And those conversations are not always productive because we oftentimes find ourselves talking past each other instead of like really listening and digging in on that. But I would love, like, when I think about social media, the first criticism I would have of it is that thing that says you've got 500 friends, you super don't have 500 friends. You have 500 mild acquaintances, and how many of these people actually care about you enough to listen to you and actually hear what you're saying instead of, just not a lot. And I would hope that we will sort of encourage an environment and a dynamic amongst the members of this board where we're not talking past each other, where we're really hearing the truth of what we're saying and being open to growth, being open to new perspectives and changes of our mindset. And if we can do that, I think we can do exactly what you're asking. I think we can get to that point. But I don't think we can simply say in the good old days, everyone would pick up the phone. I think we had people leaving and sort of dropping off because they felt disaffected and disengaged from and not a part of the conversation.
We've had people drop out of races because of social media.
Yeah.
Like in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's just a shame.
Yeah.
That's just crazy. So listen, I mean, I'm open.
Yeah.
I'm open for all of this. I want to put on the table.
Yeah.
We've bantered it about and it just, to me, it needed to be discussed. And
yeah.
To all the people in the audience, thank you for.
I mean, so I probably engage on social media more than almost anybody in this room. Shocking. But no, I mean, I think I struggle with this a little bit because I think your definition of what is appropriate might be, I am extremely respectful on social media. I try to share information. One of the things that I think has been communicated are the frustrations in the community is that they don't know what a board meeting is, or like they feel like we're hiding. And it really bothers me because I feel like it is an attack professionally on us as a board when somebody's like, you guys didn't tell us you had a meeting, you don't want us to know that information. And I feel almost like, no, wait, I want you to be there because I want you to know we're not trying to hide anything. Like we all work together. We sometimes disagree. I think that's normal. But I do try really hard to make sure, and I've stopped engaging in some groups because I think it's not productive engagement, other than posting, we have a board meeting tonight, or hey, something like the curriculum meeting got canceled, just so people don't show up and feel like we lied to them or tricked them, because I've heard that multiple times now. I don't ever converse about a human in this group on social media. I don't think I wouldn't anyway, like I think that's really beneath all of us. So I think what I struggle with is I don't know what the norms are. So if I'm communicating as a human Devin, non-board member, and I have my own political views that are mine that I'm allowed to have, right? I do that on my personal page. If I'm communicating, somebody asks me a question as a board member, then I say, hey, I'm commenting as board member Devin, so that it's very clear, because I don't want people to be confused that I'm not speaking for the board about certain beliefs of my own, right? I'm speaking as a person that has these beliefs. But I do sometimes worry that there's a void that we aren't, that gets filled by misinformation, because we are not, it's almost like, right, like if we're playing basketball, right, like you need to get to where the ball is going. Sometimes we're like not going to where the ball's going, and like the defender gets there to fill the gap, right? Because we didn't say, hey, there's a board meeting tonight. Here's all the information you need. We want to make sure questions get answered. And I do think it creates a lot of angst and frustration at times, because it's hard. I think we're getting much better, just for what it's worth. And Sarah hopefully will continue on this. It's really hard to find information. And maybe I overshare, but Yeah.
What if, I'm confused, like what information? Like you can go to the R9 website and.
Yeah, but people don't do that. So like,
But that's on
Okay,
them.
well.
right, it's on them, but then they
you have to
complain and
spoon
they
feed them,
blame
like-
us. So like,
Yeah, well, yeah.
I guess I don't like.
Yeah.
Well,
Because
then they're not that interested, is my opinion.
Well, but they're interested enough to show up during public comment and make comments and, you know, that extend. I'm not talking about tonight specifically, I'm talking about in previous meetings. And we've all sat here where people say, oh, you don't post the agendas or you're trying to hide this meeting. And it's like er9.org, upper left corner. It's right there. It's always been there. In
Or
what
the
way is
town of
this
East,
hidden?
the town of
But
Easton
sometimes we
website is
have,
even easier to use.
Like
so
special
Is it
meetings that
even
pop
easier?
up
I
and
always
DEI
just
meetings
use the
that pop,
R9.
I guess I'm less worried about our regular normal Tuesday,
Yeah.
every other or every second Tuesday of the month. But there's the curriculum committee, there's the DEI, like those meetings are less frequent. We've had a lot of special meetings over the last year.
Okay, well, why don't we,
Yeah.
this is terrific. Why don't we fix that?
Yeah.
As opposed to.
Yes, please.
I like it.
Yes.
Like, I mean.
Agreed,
okay.
but we had actually been asking for the website in particular to be fixed for a long time. And now Sarah's on board, now Dr. McKinnon's here. I think we're starting to get the team in place where we can expect for those enhancements to be made.
And I'm not talking about
I
that
think-
communication. Listen, announcing meetings on Facebook,
Yeah.
fantastic. I don't
Right.
put them
That's
anywhere.
different.
It's not that. It's, excuse me?
I'm sorry, Franny. Oh, wait.
I think she was just saying that's different than the complaint.
Yeah, it is. It is. Listen, there's been personal attacks and it's some members of this board and it's members of the other boards. And I find it distasteful and that's why I brought it up tonight. And I'm not here to squelch. I'm not here to hide. I've never been that way. I'll give people the unvarnished truth every day of the week. If some people like it, some people don't like it. John and I have had plenty of conversations that have ended, they're one-way conversations sometimes. John gets an email from me and that's it. That's the end of the conversation. And that's fine. I get it. But listen, it is about fostering communication and just, you know, getting it all on the table as I like to say. So
If I can add one more component to this that I think is just really been missing. There's no such thing as a board member orientation, but it is in our bylaws that there's supposed to be. It's a requirement of our bylaws that there is one, and yet, you know, I certainly didn't receive one. No, right?
I had a coffee with Jeff.
6 years
Right,
in and I
right.
still haven't been oriented.
Right. So this is something I think is really important. I think to be fair to Jen, if she's stepped on any toes, she hasn't had that orientation. I personally, who was I talking to today? I was talking to you about this today, that we need to sort of flesh that out. So I'm very interested in doing that and sort of building out like, and as long as no other new controversies come up, I don't have to build a budget right now. I don't have to, like, I could actually dedicate some time to building out this orientation, which I think would serve us all well. And I would love to put that in part on the next agenda, because I think I may say, here are the 10 things that should be a part of a board member orientation. And you might say, you're forgetting about these 3, or take those 2 off. And I think it would be useful for us to contribute to that together.
Can I just add that I think it's a good idea to have board member orientation, but you were talking a little bit about communication, right? That's kind of the bucket you're talking about. And you, as a board, you don't need to do this on your own. This is a district-wide and a community-wide interest. And at the beginning, I talked about the idea of we need a communication plan. And it's PR, it's branding, it's engagement, it's 2-way. And it's not 1-way, right? Where we can have focus groups about what the vision of our school system is, and people need to feel like their input is heard.
That's right.
And the more opportunities, the more times those things happen, actually, the less likely you'll have issues of board meetings. Because those other opportunities will be more frequent.
Right. Well,
and it's through Facebook Live and Zoom and focus groups, and hopefully we can get back to normal. Because part of the pressure that you're feeling is just you've only had 2 meetings in person since, right, in the last
this is the second one,
18 months or something,
right?
Yeah.
And in an information vacuum that, you know, first idea to show up, which isn't always the best one, isn't always the accurate one, you can find a lot of that misinformation. And then I can understand why any one of us might feel, you know, hey, hold on a second, that's not it. Then you're playing defense the whole time, as opposed to an intentional communication strategy that tells the world, this is who we are, this is what we do.
There are levers that we're not pulling right now, right? And that's okay. We'll just have to work out which ones to pull.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in for a
Yeah,
quick
please,
second?
please
I
do.
think, I mean, Bevan and I have talked about this a lot. How I feel about the social media stuff. And I feel like it's all kind of falling under, to me, all of the things that we're frustrated by are all kind of falling into a similar category, you know, and it is because of a lack of a communication plan, or I think over the last 18 months, so many roles and responsibilities have gotten blurred, and understandably so. I think board members have taken on things that they probably shouldn't have taken on, or they're communicating with the public in ways they shouldn't be communicating, or they're making poor decisions that they wouldn't otherwise have made, because it was hard, you know, and again, I think it's coming from a place of concern and of genuinely wanting to help and support. And the more that we can hear from you, like where those boundary lines are, like even that little bit of guidance tonight as we were looking at the data sets to say, as a board, this is what you're interested in doing. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to do. And I think the more clear our roles are for us together and out in the public, like these people kind of get, you know, Sarah keeps going and the curriculum gets up there and those information gaps get filled, then we're not going to feel like we're going to have that urge to fill that gap in the public. But I do think even as we are emerging from all of this, to Randy's point, there are board members who are absolutely inappropriately engaging on social media in hurtful ways, in unconstructive ways that are making our work and sort of the public perception of us as cohesive groups with common goals and common objectives and kids at the forefront and the heart of what we're doing, very challenging, you know, and trying to build that trust becomes an even bigger uphill climb if we see divisive commentary on social media of coming from members of our own boards. So if that can be, I think, really clarifying, like you said, drilling down, maybe possibly adding language to our social media policy, tweaking it, but really getting down into the specifics of, you know, what do we think? What is appropriate? What is not appropriate? What's allowable? I mean, we're talking about FOIA and responsibility and all of these things and what we can and cannot do.
And I'll briefly respond, and then, you know, Jeff, I know you're trying to get in. So our existing bylaws on social media are right up to the line of, you know, sort of First Amendment things, right? So we're already pressing against the borders of that. And I'm absolutely open to the discussion and talking it through, and we can write policies all day long that say anything we want them to say, the degree to which they're enforceable and wouldn't cost us a lot of money and lawyer fees down the road. But I think we need, even if we just say, here are the norms, here's the standard operating procedure, without it being a policy. We did that with the hiring process, with the negotiating committee, and it was immensely successful because now we're hiring people without, you know, all of the, you know, senior administrators at least. And, you know, we hope to not have to do that for a long time. But when we do, in case of emergency, break glass, here's the norms for how we should do that. So publishing those norms, I think, would be really helpful. Sorry, Jeff.
So I'm part of the problem, right? And I've got to fix this. And I intend to fix it the very best way that I can. I meant what I said, that I will talk to, that I'd like to meet with the people individually, or if they want to meet in 2s or 3s, I don't care. Because I feel very badly. I'm very sorry but it's done. And the only thing I can do is try to reach out to people and have a conversation so that there's better understanding. And hopefully that helps. As I say, some people will say, I don't want to, I don't want to have that conversation. I mean, I already know, I'm pretty clear that, one person doesn't. Reached out a couple of times and I get a yes, sure, and then there's no follow through. Okay, I mean, I get that. That's that's your choice. But I want to be available and I want people to understand that I recognize I was wrong and I can't take it back, but I can sure try to talk to people and let them know that some of these conspiracy theories, which are becoming quite strident, I think, have no basis in truth. But until I can sit across the table from someone and answer their questions, they won't know that. So I do intend to reach out, and we'll see how far it goes. But I realize that it's been my actions that have caused you folks to have to deal with stuff that you shouldn't have to deal with. And we're all volunteers. And the job is tough enough without having something like this, making it more difficult. So
We're still here, Jeff, and 3 out of the 6 of us just signed up for another tour, so.
Say what?
I said, we're still here and 3 out of the 6 of us just signed up for another tour.
Oh, that's
so
right.
We're gonna be okay.
3-hour tour.
Yeah, 3 hour. All right.
Moving right along.
Good, moving right along.
Yeah.
All right. So the next item, 6E, rescinding the current MOA regarding the vice principal at Helen Keller Middle School to serve associate principal. It's assistant principal. Assistant principal is the right term.
Yeah,
So,
moved.
well, but wait, so I want to bring clarity to the movement, right? Because what we're talking about is for the next contract year going forward, right? We would rescind this for this contract year and sort of somehow convert her.
So 22.
Okay, right. So moving forward after 2022.
Why are we so low?
Yeah.
They're just gonna drive around.
Yeah. So I think the chair will entertain a motion to rescind the current MOA starting in academic year 2022, 2023 for the assistant principal of Helen Keller Middle School. Thank you, Randy. Do I have a second? Thank you, Jenny. Any discussion? Any discussion? I should note, we did not come to this lightly. We did a lot of work with Annie to understand exactly why and how and.
I thought it was 12 months. I think
Yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
I've been working
Okay.
on a work she does. It's great.
Good, we'll call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimously approved at 11:19 PM. I just like doing that. All right, that takes us to board member comment.
Got a lot of stuff I want to talk about.
Denied. Look to adjourn. Thank you, Devin. Thank you, Randy. Absent objection, we are adjourned at 11:20 PM.
Holy cow.
1 month.